price of freedom is high. It always has been. And it's a price I'm willing to pay. And if I'm the only one, then so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not.
Hello and welcome to the Cine-Files, where this week we are continuing our exploration of Captain America the Winter Soldier. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, and voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And wouldn't it be sad if we continued our Captain America the Winter Soldier exploration without Geek Buddy Shannon McClung?
Yeah, he faked his death, but somehow he is back to be part of our show for part 2 of this conversation.
Shannon, thank you. Scared us a bit, but thank you and welcome back.
I literally did not know everything that that John is claiming I've done. This is just like the Winter Soldier. This is paranoia. This is politics. I didn't realize. Sorry.
Oof.
There are more surprises in store. Believe me, this podcast is going to get nuts.
Speaking of get nuts on the Patreon. Head on over to the Patreon and support us on the Cine-Files. Patreon.com/the Cine-Files. So many great tiers, so many great benefits for you all. We just had our advisory board meeting a week or so ago, which was a great conversation and fun time with those people. And of course, the shorts that we do and so much going on in the world of the cinema. We got the watch alongs. All those things are happening there for our patrons. So if you're not a patron yet, please think about supporting the Cine-Files at patreon.com/the Cine-Files. Multiple tiers, multiple benefits for you all to enjoy. Things like that.
Absolutely. We cannot wait to see you there. Shall we jump back into the film?
Let's do it.
It's definitely at a low point because we are still at the hospital where Nick Fury has apparently just passed away. And now Natasha wants to know what's going on. She's asking Steve why he was in the apartment. He says, I don't know. And right at this moment that they're talking, there's Brock Rumlow, who wants Steve back at S.H.I.E.L.D.
Cap, they want you back at S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, give me a second.
They want you now.
Okay.
You're a terrible liar.
That is a great line delivery by Scarlett Johansson. I mean, again, that's not a shade that we have seen of Natasha Romanoff up to this point. But you see how affected she is by the death of Nick Fury and the fact that Captain America just lied straight to her face.
Yeah.
Great moment.
And now Steve needs to go back to S.H.I.E.L.D. and he realizes he still has this drive that Nick Fury had given him in his apartment. And he looks at something and we don't know what he's looking at. And then we see a guy that is refilling a vending machine and he heads out. And just as he heads out, there's a whip pan to that machine. And we see that he has hidden the drive inside the vending machine.
I also think this is a great moment, the Rumlow situation, because remember, like, Fury has just faked his own death. We as the audience are like, what is going on here? Who has attacked him? We're not thinking Pierre. Well, I mean, you wouldn't if he hadn't blown it, Robert Redford. But if you, let's say you hadn't seen any of those interviews. So you're like, well, he's just had this conversation with Pierce. What is going on? Has Hydra uncovered, or has the evil people uncovered what he's doing? We don't know what's going on. So you have these questions. Having Rumlow be like now to Captain America when he was taking orders from Captain America's ship, I think gives us this hint that the film itself, the mood of the film has shifted. Like, this is now more dangerous. You can sense your spidey sense is going off, that there's something else going on here because everything is kind of shifted towards Captain America and people coming after him, so to speak.
Well, and Steve Rogers, this was a risky move for Steve Rogers because, he's not schooled in counterintelligence the way that Black Widow is, to put this drive behind 4 packs of bubblegum rather than one of the less popular snacks all the way in the back. I thought was an interesting move. I was like, oh, okay. This is why Captain America is the symbol and on the front lines. You don't put him out in Black Ops. He's going to be terrible.
Can you imagine if someone other than Natasha had just bought some bubble gum and ended up with that drive and took it home and plugged it into the USB port on their MacBook? I mean,
that's a great what if episode.
They'd be dead. They'd be dead
immediately.
Probably, yeah.
We're back at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. I love the moment that Steve, now he's in Cap uniform, walks by Sharon and she says,
Captain Rogers?
Neighbor.
Neighbor's great. It has, because there's so much of, you lied to me, You pretended to be someone else. I do not trust you. I'm pissed off, but I don't have time to deal with that at all right now. And I'm going to say all of that in one word. And now he meets with Robert Redford or Pierce.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I would call this the Scooby-Doo factor, or maybe the Scooby-Doo percentage, which is like, okay, you have someone who is pretending not to be the villain, but it's going to get revealed that they're the villain at some point. I think Pierce is the least good cover of any of those kinds of characters. I mean, John, you say we kind of suspect him.
This is the moment. Well, that's what I mean. The Rumlow thing first, and then this moment with Pierce. Now we're like, okay, something's going on here. Yeah.
And after mentioning that, his father served in World War II, he now tells this whole story about how they were in Bogota and they get grabbed by terrorists and he wants to negotiate and Nick doesn't want to negotiate and he orders Nick to stand down and Nick doesn't stand down, and that's what saves all of their lives. And that to me is, puts us exactly in the motivation of Pierce's bad guy motivation is, you can't actually negotiate with bad guys at all. You just have to kill them. That's the only way to do things.
Right. He learned that, right? Because his daughter had been in danger in that Bogota story. But also I think this is such great writing from Marcus and McFeely because, again, you're laying the groundwork for the motivation for this villain, for this character, for Pierce, right? And the fact that he's starting out, my father served in World War II, this kind of buttering up of Steve Rogers. But how many of us now, like in our world over the last few decades, have seen politicians who have been connected to the military, have had family members connected to the military, and we marvel at their inability to put two and two together when they take certain positions on certain issues. And so I think this is such an interesting point that you're showing someone like Pierce, who should by all rights and accounts be totally respectful to Captain America, who saved the world, saved us from the Nazis in that universe, and did all this incredible stuff. And here he is, like, using that to butter Captain America because he is part of Hydra, which was in essence responsible for Nazism in a certain section. So I just find that to be a fascinating thing to make him the villain, this all-American guy who's got all this stuff behind him to support him as being a person who should be a friend of the military, but he's gone so far over the edge that he can't see as evil anymore because he thinks what he's doing is for the best for his country and for the world.
Well, and he also tries to establish trust with Captain America very early when he says, did you know your apartment was bugged? And he's like, yeah, I did. He's like, Nick told me. He's like, yeah. Did he tell you he was the one who bugged it? Yeah. I mean, he's immediately throwing his friend under the bus, trying to be like, maybe this relationship is salvageable. Yeah. But very quickly he sees, like, by the end of the scene that he's like, yeah, we're going to need to take Captain America out.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think this is a fairly weak move by Pierce because it's like, yes, certainly Steve Rogers has reasons to distrust Nick Fury. I don't think it's surprising once he knows that his apartment was bugged to find out that Nick Fury was involved in bugging it. I don't think that's a surprise. And he has no reasons to trust Pierce at all.
Yeah.
Particularly because Nick said S.H.I.E.L.D. was compromised and then Nick gets shot and is dead. So not a lot of reasons to trust anyone at S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. Now his next move is essentially to show Batroc and tell a backstory about the hijacking and to essentially try to frame Nick Fury for the hijacking. And you know what? I don't even really pay that much attention to their stuff about addresses and, it doesn't really matter because really Steve's not going to buy any of this.
Yeah.
We knew that despite all the diplomacy and the handshaking and the rhetoric, that to build a really better world sometimes means having to tear the old one down.
That line is, you've taken off the Scooby-Doo mask. You know what I mean? I mean, like there's no mystery that this guy might not be the bad guy. Oh, you're the bad guy,
Yeah, and he's kind of low-key sitting in for, American foreign policy in certain countries over the years, right? This idea of taking down whatever regime is there so we can prop up who we want to be in power and seeing if that works and, for our own benefits and what have you. I think that's an important thing that it's a low-key kind of commentary on American foreign policy by what he's doing and talking about. And it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones near the end. I guess I shouldn't spoil it. Some people haven't seen it, but you know, a certain character wants to destroy everything and start it all over again in their image and what they think is right. But that's always the default of the dictator, is that they want to destroy everything that's been before, like a lion wants to kill all the other cubs from the other lion so that they can take over and only their progeny is in the pride. So, you know, it's those things that are cyclical in power and corrupted power.
It's where I go like, okay, you think that you can kill all these people and build the new world. You couldn't even handle killing Nick Fury.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like your plan was to attack him in the middle of Washington, D.C. with all of these people pretending to be cops. Like, how are you going to get away with any of this? Like, your plan is bad.
Captain, you were the last one to see Nick alive. I don't think that's an accident. And I don't think you do either. So I'm going to ask again. Why was he there?
And it's so obvious a threat question, you know?
He told me not to trust anyone.
I wonder if that included him.
Sorry. Those were his last words.
And he heads to the door with the shield. I love the noise the shield makes when he puts it back on. You know, it's such a cool sound effect.
Captain, somebody murdered my friend. I'm going to find out why. Anyone gets in my way, they're going to regret it. Anyone.
Okay, you're a bad guy. I think we got it.
Yeah.
By the way, figuring out the plot for this movie took basically a year of hammering it out with Feige and the writers and the Russos, because these things are complicated. I mean, this is a complicated film. When you get into thrillers and stuff, this gets really, really hard.
Yeah, and I would push back a little bit on your assessment of his plan. I think the plan is essentially, I'm going to make this work, and the Security Council will have no choice but to come with me, because by the time I pull this plan off, they're all going to be, how can I say this? It's going to be under my thumb, so to speak. And so his plan is essentially to launch these helicarriers, shoot all those people, kill all those people, and then essentially use fear to override everything else. And if the popular sentiment is on his side, these Security Council people having an issue with it will shut up once he gets into that position of power, because he has the people on his side. Now, is it a foolproof plan, Steve? I think you're absolutely right. It's not a foolproof plan, but I think there is some wicked, dastardly logic that if things fell a certain way, it would absolutely work in his benefit. And whatever nefarious means he used to get there would get brushed under the rug, because the whole intelligence apparatus would have to be called into question. And there's not a lot of senators, as we see by the end of the movie, that want to have that happen, you know?
Well, and I have 3 helicarriers that can just pinpoint anyone in the world and wipe them out instantly. So that's a good thing to have if your plan's going south.
Yeah. Even poor Michael Linden, who is the manager of the Little League team. It was yeah. You know.
There you go. So we had a fantastic, super well done opening action scene on the ship. Mm. We had a ridiculously practical effect car chase scene on the streets of DC with Nick Fury. We had a great intro to the Winter Soldier when he catches Cap's shield. And now we're about to step into what is arguably one of the greatest fight scenes in the history of the MCU.
Agreed.
Mm.
I love, and in particular, it's the setup, which is Cap steps into that glass elevator that we've already established. And then Brock and a couple other guys come in and they're just talking to each other like you do, like they don't even notice Cap. And some more guys come in and Cap is watching, and it's all the little things he notices. He notices that one of the guys is sweating. He sees how people are clutching their, like this briefcase. We see all sorts of little details, that they're armed. Some of them are armed. Some of them are armored. And slowly but surely, we're figuring it out. And I think this is one, too, that totally benefits from this being set up in the trailer.
But I like that we're figuring out as he's figuring it out. That's a nice little moment, right? Like every floor, new people are getting on, and then you're like, wait, okay, all right. And I love that. As we're kind of the audience, or he and the audience are one in this scene.
So one of the descriptions I heard of how they came up with this fight was they were kept continually thinking, what would happen if 10 highly trained martial artists got into an elevator with a silverback gorilla?
Wow. That's great.
I love that description. This is the first thing they shot in the movie.
Wow.
Which is nuts to me. And it's funny. When I first read this, I went, that's a long time. And when I thought about it, like, I can't believe they did it this fast. It was 4 days to shoot this fight scene.
Wow. And that's when you've got your star in an action sequence where errant fists can make contact on your first day, that definitely seems like a roll of the dice.
Well, particularly in such close quarters, there's no margin for error here. And the moment, so Cap has figured it out, and then he says,
before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
I don't know who came up with that line. Shannon, I'm sure you've had this experience where every once in a while the great line comes to you and you just like go in there to see you pat yourself on the back, but that's a pat yourself on the back line.
I mean, that's right up there with Neighbor.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so great. And they go at him, they shock him. And one of the things they said too was, and they said this about the Nick Fury sequence in the cars, is like, it should be tough to break Nick Fury. And they said the same thing here. It takes a lot to take down Cap. The shocks, the hits that he's taken. I love the handle of the briefcase that becomes like a magnetic thing. Finally he takes the offensive, and he starts to step by step take all the guys out. And there are a bunch of great little moments, like him climbing up the wall and using his leg strength to pull his hand off because it's been trapped there. Finally, it's just him and Brock.
Whoa, big guy. I just want you to know, Cap, it's impersonal!
And on the word personal, he goes back on the attack. If Steve Rogers was the size that he is, and the strength of a normal human in this size, but didn't have super strength, can Brock beat him up?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I think he can.
Yeah, I think Brock Rumlow probably has trained longer than Steve Rogers, but Steve Rogers packs that wallop of super soldier strength.
It kind of feels personal.
Anytime Cap steps on the shield for it to pop up and catches it, it's cool. And if this weren't enough, we're not done with our action sequence, because now he tries to open the door. More guys are coming. He cuts the cable. I don't know why the cables of this elevator are so exposed, but he cuts the cable. It starts to drop, goes to another, now he's between floors, pries the door opens. More bad guys are coming. So now Cap makes the choice to jump through the glass window, crashes down through a glass roof. And it's, 20 stories he falls and lands on the shield.
And a great take to Maximiliano Hernandez here. I believe this is the take because, he's watching the fight through the security camera. But when Cap jumps out and lands on the ground, the shield does, kind of cushion the fall. But you hear Sitwell go like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. And now Steve heads out, jumps over barriers. There's a jet coming at him that tells him to stand down. He takes that out with his shield.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
And the plane spins down and he is gone.
Yeah. Cap shield play in this movie. I think this is probably the best shield play that we get in all of the Marvel movies that Captain America pops up in.
Agreed.
So I think originally what was going to happen as when Hawkeye was going to be in the film, when Cap escapes, Hawkeye is the one who chases him down, and then they were supposed to have a fight.
Wow.
And Cap wins, but you see Hawkeye whisper to Cap, "Make it look good," because Quinjet is above him, and then he tells Cap, "There's a tracker in your suit." Because this is the last time we see that blue uniform.
Oh.
Right. And there is a deleted scene where the uniform is tracked to a high school gym where people are playing basketball and they find the uniform in a bag. So, yeah, I see how that could have worked if they had kept that scene, both those scenes in there, yeah.
I mean, in a Hawkeye fight would have been fun, but Cap versus a jet, come on.
I mean, that was awesome. Right, exactly.
Yeah. We're with Agent Sitwell in operations, and he basically gets to give his Tommy Lee Jones from The Fugitive speech, of all the ways that we're going to use to track Captain America.
Scan all open sources, phones, computers, PDAs, whatever. If someone tweets about this guy, I want to know about it.
With all due respect, if S.H.I.E.L.D. is conducting a manhunt for Captain America, we deserve to know why.
And in comes Robert Redford.
Because he lied to us. Captain Rogers has information regarding the death of Director Fury. He refused to share it. As difficult as this is to accept, Captain America is a fugitive from S.H.I.E.L.D.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, there's a deleted scene between Maria Hill and Sitwell where she taunts him a little bit, basically saying, I think Sitwell's kind of like, we're going to get him. And Maria Hill's like, well, Steve Rogers tends to inspire loyalty. No. And at that moment, Sitwell puts Maria Hill under investigation.
Oh. As you should, I mean, if there was a split in the Geek Buddies, and Vogel had an uprising, and Shannon and kicked Rocha out, and Shannon said, the outlaw inspires loyalty. I mean, I think that would be very clear.
Rocha and I went and saw Thor: The Dark World without Vogel. He's never let us hear the end of it.
We sent him a text and a picture of us at the theater.
That's fast, because Vogel has never done anything without going with all he's never excluded anyone. For instance, he would never plan a trip to Disneyland and not invite me. I mean, that would never happen.
Well, I love that he blatantly just says it on the Geek Buddies now. Hey, Shannon, I'm going to text you about the end of Baby Reindeer, but just you. We're just going to have our separate conversation. He just does it so blatantly now. But yes, he should be upset about being left out. Anyway, let's move on. But we digress.
I'm just laughing because I'm just thinking of all the podcasts. If we actually were to let's have the airing of the grievances.
Oh no! People have been clamoring for Geek Buddies After Dark. I think it's going to come one of these days for sure.
I will definitely be calling into that show. There's no question about it.
I should set up a call for that.
We see some feet walking. There's a guy in a hood, so he's kind of in a disguise. And we're in the hospital and looking at that vending machine, and the card is obviously gone. I love that we see Natasha in a reflection, and I also love Steve Rogers' anger when he grabs her very forcefully and pushes her into the next room.
Where is it?
Safe.
Do better.
Where did you get it?
Why would I tell you?
Fury gave it to you. Why?
What I think is so great, I mean, I love Black Widow. I love Natasha. I love the character. I have since the beginning of the show, but I think they do it's not that I think that you can't trust her or that I distrust her in this film. It's that I completely understand why Steve Rogers doesn't trust her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, and her chewing bubblegum while she's answering these questions, but it's just not the first time she's been interrogated by a strong male figure in her life who is physically trying to intimidate her. Yeah. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because that's the last thing that's going to work on her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think they did a wonderful job after the initial complaints of the Avengers with Black Widow, where everyone's like, oh, she's just pew-pewing all over the place with a couple of pistols, to do a better job of rounding out and fleshing out her character and showing why she's such a essential part of the MCU and the Avengers themselves by showing her espionage and skill set and all these things that she can do as a spy. And this is one of those moments, showing her toughness, showing her resilience under pressure. It's great to see that. And Scarlett does a great job when she has these moments.
Well, in particular, the thing I think she does so well in this film is mixing that strength and all of that character and all of that experience with real vulnerability.
Yeah, 100%.
Because then, he continues to push her and he says,
what's on it?
I don't know.
Stop lying.
I only act like I know everything, Rogers.
That's a great line.
Yeah.
And I also think it puts you to the moment where she watched Nick Fury die. And there's real vulnerability here.
I know who killed Fury. Most of the intelligence community doesn't believe he exists. The ones that do call him the Winter Soldier. He's credited with over 24 assassinations in the last 50 years.
The last 50 years is a line that you should bump on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Steve should say, whoa, last 50 years, I saw someone, he was not 70 years old. Like clearly, this doesn't make sense, but we don't bump on it. And she talks about this experience she had near Odessa.
But the Winter Soldier was there. I was covering my engineer, so he shot him Straight through me.
She shows her scar.
Soviet slug, no rifling. Bye-bye bikinis.
And I love Steve's line. Yeah, I bet you look terrible in them now. Again, this is where Marvel is doing such a great job of having a great action sequence, a truly dramatic situation, and the jokes work perfectly.
Nick Fury was murdered in cold blood. To any reasonable person, that would make him a martyr, not a traitor.
And there we are with Robert Redford talking to the council about Nick Fury, about their friendship. And then they're pushing him pretty hard. And he says,
Are you calling for my resignation? I've got a pen and paper right here.
That discussion can be tabled for a later time.
It's so funny because Robert Redford can make boring lines totally interesting for me. I just really like Robert Redford,
That's why he's a great choice for this role.
And what do they say? They decide we need to reactivate Project Insight, which of course is what Pierce wanted in the first place. And I think if you wanted to put in the dictionary or in the actor's handbook, this is how you do the expression smug. Like the cut to Redford is absolutely perfect for it.
100%. 100%.
First rule of going on the run is don't run, walk.
I think this is a great setup for it's not a buddy movie exactly, but it's like, the great soldier has to learn from the spy. Mm-hmm. And we go to the Apple store. This was Natasha's first day of the shoot, by the way. And what we find out, we're going to the Apple store to plug in that drive, and we find out there's a homing program, so we're only going to have 9 minutes before S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up, and they plug it in. And she does some AI computer tech talk, which I always find ridiculous in all of these movies, but you always have to have it. And in the midst of running the tracer to find out where this drive came from, a helpful technician from the Apple store comes up to help them.
This is where you see how good Natasha is, again, at going undercover.
Oh, no, my fiance was just helping me with some honeymoon destinations.
Right. And Steve very awkwardly says, yeah, we're getting married. I mean, it is the most awkward line delivery. And then the employee spots where they're looking at, and he says, oh, where are you looking? And Steve says, New Jersey. And as he's basically looking at Steve Rogers, who has glasses on, he's like, you know what? And Steve, has no poker face, basically is just kind of like, oh no, I've been spotted. He's like,
I have the exact same glasses.
And Natasha, without looking up from the computer.
Wow, you two are practically twins.
Yeah.
And this actor, his name's D.C. Pierce, and he's a character actor, has a great line. Oh, I wish specimen as he bows. Just such a great comic moment. Again, like this is what the Russos and Marcus and McFeely do so well together. Is you have this very high tension sequence with the pressure release of a comedic moment with this helpful Apple employee.
Yeah. And it reveals things about Steve and Natasha's characters. It does so much. I mean, it's an exposition moment, but it does so much for the scene. And I think, and John, we talked about this a lot, is that one of the signs of a great movie is that every single supporting character is great.
Yeah.
And this guy comes in for 3 minutes and it's great. He's a perfectly realized character and it's really fun. Yep. So we know guys are coming to get them. We grab the drive. We head out. We have Brock Rumlow and his team is coming into the mall. And of course, Steve is thinking about how we're going to fight them because he is the soldier. And he says,
2 behind, 2 across, 2 coming straight at us. If they make us, I'll engage. You hit the south escalator of the metro.
Shut up and put your arm around me. Laugh at something I said.
What?
Do it.
And then Steve Rogers' fake laugh. It's the worst. And then by the worst, I mean the best.
Which is why they buy it, because it seems like a regular person making a laugh like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And now Rumlow is coming towards the escalator right near them, and we're about to get to them, and she says,
Kiss me.
What?
Public displays of affection make people very uncomfortable.
Yes, they do.
And they kiss. And of course, Rumlow doesn't notice them at all.
He's so uncomfortable?
It's not exactly the word I would use.
I wrote down, great.
Yeah.
Any speculation on Steve Rogers' feelings at this moment?
Oh, yeah. I think he's totally attracted to Natasha, but she's such a, how can I say this? She's such a strong, kind of slightly aggressive woman that it unsettles him. But he is absolutely attracted to her sexually. He just would never admit it. The good all-American. Because remember, as we said in the first part, he's still that little scrawny kid inside of that muscled body. So she unsettles him big time. He would probably never normally speak to a woman like that, right? Didn't he make a comment like that in First Avenger? Like, the girls don't ever pay attention to me when they're out on their date with Bucky before he goes off to World War II. So him being nervous around Natasha makes sense, because Natasha, as we find out in the Black Widow movie, and as I'm sure Scarlett did in her work in creating the character, her sexuality is very easy for her. So that unsettles Steve, because that's not something that he's comfortable around.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say, is that I think it's fairly well documented that not only is Black Widow a good kisser, she is a trained kisser.
Yes, right. 100%. Yes.
And my assumption is when she decides to kiss Steve Rogers, she laid on a kiss that was, well practiced.
Made his, as they said, made his toes curl.
Yeah.
Red Room approved. and now we're in
we're driving with the two of them, and this is so much where we have the feeling of some of those 70s thrillers, and where and in particular Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway together fleeing the CIA in 3 Days of the Condor, which is why, by the way, Kevin Feige's nickname for this movie was 3 Days of Captain America.
That's funny.
Where did Captain America learn how to steal a car?
Nazi Germany. And we're borrowing. Take your feet off the dash.
We head into New Jersey, and I just love, I really love their relationship.
All right, I have a question for you, which you do not have to answer. I feel like if you don't answer it, though, you're kind of answering it,
What?
Was that your first kiss since 1945?
It was not my first kiss since 1945. I'm 95. I'm not dead.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think it is true, but Cap is too much of a gentleman from the 1940s to kiss and tell. So I think that's the most you'll get. At least I think it's true. I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's true.
Well, are we talking 1945? Is that when the plane went down?
Yeah, right.
Because when he was on that USO tour, he definitely, there was the one, Marjorie from Game of Thrones. She definitely kissed him in front of Peggy.
Yes,
Peggy kisses him. I bet on that USO tour. I don't think he was. I don't think he was a man about town necessarily, but I imagine he probably got a peck or two.
I'm sure there's a couple of sweet dancers from Midwestern towns that he had a little kiss or two with. Yeah, I agree with you, Shannon.
But I think that since being thawed, he is not. But I also think he is not lying, because I think he kissed Peggy on the cheek, while she's old Peggy with Alzheimer's on the cheek. And therefore, in his mind, he has had a kiss. Wow. That is how I'm constructing this.
Steve, I 100% subscribe to your theory. I think you are absolutely correct. That is how Steve Rogers would think of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been unthawed for a few years, so I kind of feel like somebody might have asked him out and did it for him. Having had a friend who, has had women fall all over him when he doesn't put the energy out there or drop their headshots with the phone numbers on them right in front of him, I can attest to the fact that there are some women who are quite happy to throw themselves at certain attractive men. So I imagine he maybe had a kiss or two, or someone has stolen a kiss with him for something. So. But you might be right. Maybe he's just kind of looking at it more innocently than that.
I'm certain that women have thrown themselves at him since he's been in this century. But But needless to say, he's not have a lot of experience.
No.
Believe it or not, it's kind of hard to find someone with shared life experience.
Which I think is a great line.
Yeah.
A really great line. And Natasha's response is, well, you just make stuff up. You don't need shared life, because she doesn't have shared life experience with people. She'll just make up a lie.
It's a tough way to live.
It's a good way not to die, though.
And this is the difference in their philosophies.
Yeah.
And it goes to what he was saying to Nick Fury about, he can't lead a team without trust if everyone's not on the same page. That's what being a soldier is.
It's kind of hard to trust someone when you don't know who that someone really is.
Yeah. Who do you want me to be?
How about a friend?
Great line.
Yeah. Now we pull up to the abandoned base.
The file came from these coordinates.
So did I.
And we realize where he was trained.
Camp Lahai.
And now we have this flashback where he basically sees himself as skinny Steve, not keeping up and failing.
Well, and he also sees the flagpole. Like
Oh,
the
right.
flagpole is there. That
Great
is
point.
from First Avenger, and that's the
right.
first time he got to ride with Peggy.
Right.
So we break in, go down some stairs, turn some lights on, and we are in S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Maybe the very first S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters.
Doing Avengers Endgame.
We see photos of Howard Stark. We see Peggy.
Who's a girl?
He doesn't answer. And there's a keypad, and Natasha uses the trick of putting dust on it in order to see where the fingerprints are. And I will say that the MCU clearly stole from me because I used this exact thing in 2000 when I did Siren, which is among the very, very first web series. And in the first episode, Elena does that in Siren. Just saying. MCU, I'll take your check anytime.
Please.
They go down. The music is great. The tension is building. Doors open. It's dark. They move out cautiously into a fantastic old school computer set that I think looks just great.
This can't be the data point. This technology is ancient.
And yet, strangely enough, we find a USB port in order to plug in our little drive to this old school computer. The computers warm up.
Shall we play a game? It's from a movie that was really popular.
I saw it.
So somewhere on one of Steve Rogers' lists is the film War Games.
Romanov, Natalia Alyanovna, born 1984.
It's some kind of recording.
I am not a recording, Fräulein. I may not be the man I was when the captain took me prisoner in 1945, but I am.
And we get to meet Arnim Zola. How do you feel about this version of Zola in this movie?
This was the perfect way to use a really great actor again, someone that you would probably thought initially like they're off the table unless we do flashbacks, but using them in this way was awesome, and again just a great callback to that first movie. And in one of the earlier drafts, the writers Marcus and McFeely had used a robotic. At one point, Arnim Zola was going to basically become like a robot. Like he was going to have a robotic body.
Like he is in the comics.
Yeah, they were gonna do a whole fight scene, and apparently again Feige vetoed that, which is like it's not this movie. But
we're going off.
Yeah, but I mean, you see, like that was very much the comic book version of this story, and Feige was like, nope, this is how the cinematic universe is going to be.
Right, because in the comic version, for those who don't know, Zola's got the robotic body, as Shannon said, and he's got a holographic head. And sometimes it's in the middle of his chest, sometimes it's above the body. It just depends on how the design is. And I thought this was a great way to use him in the movie and make him even more chilling and effective and dangerous, right? Because this idea of and Steve is a man out of time with technology, so he'd be so overwhelmed by this. Natasha is much more knowledgeable of it. The fact that both of them are a bit out of sorts by what Zola has been able to do here, I think is fantastic. And when Zola starts to essentially, like a villain in a James Bond movie, reveal the whole plan, it's overwhelming how massive this plan is. And Zola's really even more scary by the end of it. And even watching it in 2024, Steve and Shannon, it feels topical as hell to see something like this, man.
What's so crazy about this sequence is that this is just a big exposition dump. This is, the hero or the villain explaining, the plot of the movie to the hero. It's all of those things. It's all of those cliches. And yet, because there's all sorts of filmmaking elements in terms of the sound design and in particular the way it's edited with all of the footage coming in and out and all the things we're seeing, that it's visually and auditorially stimulating. So it's exciting in that sense. But then the other thing about it, I think, is that Steve Rogers died to kill Hydra. Like, that's what he did. He sacrificed his life driving the plane into the ice, knowing that he would lose Peggy, he would lose everything, but it was worth it because he was destroying Hydra and saving the world.
Yeah.
And now in this scene, he's realizing that's not what happened at all. That's like, and again, we're taking every single thing away from Steve Rogers. And in this moment, we're taking away his heroic death.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah,
That's not meaningful anymore. And the things we find out is that Zola was brought in through Operation Paperclip, and he was very useful in technology and working with S.H.I.E.L.D. And of course, he was secretly bringing Hydra into S.H.I.E.L.D. And that when he got really sick with some fatal disease, they decided to put his brain into a computer, which is what, we're literally standing in his brain at this moment. And as we're moving forward with the things that happen with Hydra, in addition to seeing things like Peggy Carter and seeing Howard, we also see things about assassinations and some of these assassinations that are happening. And one of them that flies by real fast is a newspaper article that says Howard and Maria Stark die in car accidents.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys know what this meant when you saw this in the movie the first time?
I did not. I don't know if Shannon did, but I did.
No.
Me neither.
Hydra created a world so chaotic that humanity is finally ready to sacrifice its freedom to gain its security.
I mean, this is a film that is 10 years after 9/11, right? 13 years after 9/11, right? 2014. So, but look, we'd had the Patriot Act. We'd had questions about surveillance. That was becoming a big deal. I think Snowden was also, it happened. So this idea of the intelligence apparatus lying to us, the intelligence apparatus wanting to create something to watch every one of our movements. What we hear now, the word algorithm now has become a common term to use, and Zola's using it in 2014 to explain how they're able to manipulate millions and millions of people and countries and cause regime changes. All of it is incredibly chilling, to hear. Yet it's something that's going on even more so nowadays. And so it's fascinating to put this in the middle of a comic book movie where everyone's trying to talk, insult comic book movies or say they're not that serious. There's a lot here that is pretty powerful and unsettling to watch and listen if you are any student of history when you're watching this,
There's the quote from Ben Franklin that I always love, which is, "They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety."
Yeah.
Ben Franklin's always a good one for a quote on a comic book movie, I think.
We won, Captain. Your death amounts to the same as your life. A zero sum.
Boom! I mean, just boom. As you said, Steve, right on the nose. As if you didn't catch it already subtly, Zola says it. You thought your sacrifice was something, but it meant nothing because we just went underground and insidiously corrupted the systems that you died for to preserve, which is such a slap in the face,
Yeah, and Steve reacts to it by punching that screen of Zola. And it's so ineffectual because it's like that screen's not him. It's kind of like everything in this, what this movie is about is like Steve's about punching people. He's like, put the bad guy in front of him and he will punch the bad guy. Right. But what if you can't punch the bad guy? And that's this moment. He can punch that screen all he wants, but that does nothing to stop this plan.
He knocked out Adolf Hitler 187 times in the first movie.
Yeah. And then we hear is that a little more about Project Insight, which is that Zola created the algorithm.
What kind of algorithm? What does it do?
The answer to your question is fascinating. Unfortunately, you shall be too dead to hear it.
We see suddenly the doors are closing and we got an incoming missile fired by S.H.I.E.L.D. And Steve grabs Natasha and jumps down into this grate at the last possible moment as the explosion hits. And then we're in this moment in the black and we just hear straining. And then there's a little bit of light as Steve Rogers pulls Natasha back up out of this wreckage. It's late at night. We're in a very nice looking house. And there is Robert Redford, who's going to the fridge to get some milk. And by the way, there's a bottle of Newman's own pasta sauce in the fridge that Redford insisted on, which I think is really funny for his good friend Paul Newman. Then he turns and the Winter Soldier is just sitting there.
Doing some more eye acting.
Yeah. And this is very much inspired by 3 Days of the Condor because this scene almost exactly like it happens where, we show up somewhere totally unexpected in this very dangerous place in somebody's house.
The timetable is moved. Our window is limited. 2 targets, level 6. They already cost me Zola.
So now we're like, okay. Now we really understand what's happening. And as you said, Shannon, it's just eye acting from Sebastian Stan. And then we hear...
Sorry, Mr. Pierce,
I forgot my...
And there is who we can only assume is his cleaning lady.
Yes, Renata.
Again, Redford's so great.
Oh, Renata. I wish you would have knocked.
And we know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And I think we know that Pierce likes Renata. She's worked for him a long time, probably.
It was a legitimate comment.
Yeah.
I wish you'd knocked.
Yeah. And then he grabs his gun and shoots her.
Which makes sense because he's about to sacrifice 20 million people.
Oh, yeah.
What's one person, even though he knows her, right? And so it shows the coldness of Pierce and the callousness of Pierce, which I think is the final piece of the puzzle in you really seeing him as this villain. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and also he shoots her twice.
Yes, right.
He takes 2 shots. So either he is a bad shot, or as you were just saying, Johnny, the callousness of this character.
And I think now he's got to call a team and clean it up, and there's going to be a story that he's got to tell his family about what happened to Renata, and that's the sacrifice you make to save the world. That's what's in his mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sam is out running. It's morning. He gets back home. He goes into his kitchen. He grabs some OJ. There's a knock on the door, and there is Steve and Natasha, both looking a lot the worse for wear. And he says,
I'm sorry about this. We need a place to lay low.
Everyone we know is trying to kill us.
Not everyone.
This movie has so many of these kinds of lines where it's just like, that is the perfect line at the perfect moment right here.
Yep.
By the way, it was Kevin Feige's idea that the third act was, we have to take down S.H.I.E.L.D. It's so funny, with all the what happened to Kevin Feige, is he spread too thin, all this stuff like that. It's in this movie, you hear why he is a great executive,
Mm-hmm.
He's not necessarily writing the script or directing the script, but he's pointing them in the right direction at the right time.
Yeah.
Well, and also the partnership that he had with the Russos and Marcus and McFeely, because you look at that foursome's career post Endgame, and they have not come close to replicating the success that they found. Yeah. I mean, Feige and the Russos, they just worked really, really well together. And obviously Feige works with a lot of directors, but the Russos turned out 4 of the best and one of the most successful movies of all time.
Yeah.
So when you hear these stories about the Russos saying they want original franchises, which I think they're absolutely right. We do need that. You really want them to come back just because you just can't argue with their success.
Yeah. No one they've mentioned, in my opinion, besides Coogler, excites me about directing the next 2 Avengers movies. No one. And I just want them to come back, and Marcus and McFeely to come back to kind of figure this out and get it back to where it's supposed to be. Because I don't know where Feige is now. I don't know why he loves Rick and Morty so much, but and no offense to people who do, but these writers that he's pulled off of those of that writing staff isn't as strong as what you've seen from Marcus and McFeely. And I mean, overall, there've been a couple of well-written movies, but overall just haven't quite gotten there. And I think bringing back the old guard is the right way to go.
I'll tell you the thought that I had recently, because a lot of this comes because I'm a big fan of the Geek Buddies. So I've listened to you guys talk about the MCU, for a couple of years now about what's going on and what you hope. And for me, it was really, I read that MCU book. And what was interesting, the thing that I really learned, and I know this from the history of Star Wars too, is there was tremendous chaos. It's not like on Iron Man, they knew what they were doing and they were following a plan. And it's not like every one of the movies, there was tremendous chaos and rewriting and reshoots and trying to figure it out, and disasters happening and showing up on the set, not knowing what they were doing. I would say up to this point, Captain America: The Winter Soldier is the movie where they were most on the ball and actually executed what they planned to do. Most of the other movies up to this point, I think they got really, really lucky. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I know it sounds insulting, but George Lucas on Star Wars got really, really, really lucky. That movie was a disaster where people are making fun of it. The actors are making up their own lines. The studio doesn't like it. The crew doesn't like it. The first cut is terrible. They managed to get John Williams and Marsha Lucas and other people to come in and they turn it into one of the great films of all time. I think Marvel got lucky repeatedly up until this movie, which I think they really executed beautifully. And so I think, we've put them too much on a pedestal, It's not that they're not geniuses. It's that making movies like this is really, really hard. And the luck has not gone their way in the last couple of years.
Oh, well, what's the true phrase about entertainment, sports, or anything is that you are the victim of your own success.
Yes.
If you're very good at it, people expect that as the bar and not what they would take as the foundation of the bar for another creative. Your bar, you have set that bar so high that when you can't meet it, that's when ridicule comes. And that's when people question whether you can still do it or not, right? Even though you can do it better than maybe 90% of the people who can do it.
So we're in the bathroom, we're washing up, and I wonder if on the schedule they have, on this day, Chris Evans has to be ripped.
Probably. Oh, Shannon, you know that. Yes. If they're going to tell you when you're naked and you as an actor are like, okay, or half naked, how many days into the shoot is that? When am I? So you adjust your body. You don't eat. You don't drink water. You don't whatever. It's 100% the truth. Am I wrong, Shannon? Am I wrong on this?
No. You're very, very correct. The first movie that I did, I had to have a shirtless scene, and that was my third day of work. And like they weren't successive. Like it was 2 weeks in, and I wasn't supposed to be some sort of elite athlete.
Right,
but
right.
My pride as a human, I was just like, wait, what? I have to take my shirt off. Okay, all right. Well, I'm not eating for 5 days, and I'm doing crunches, like an hour before I have to be on set. So yes, that is very much a thing. They do let them know.
Yeah.
There's a story from The Talented Mr. Ripley where Matt Damon was on the beach, and Tom Ripley in that movie, he's not supposed to be in good shape. Matt Damon is in good shape, so like he kind of fasted for about a couple of weeks to be as skinny and as gaunt as he could be when they have this scene. And apparently when they were shooting, they didn't get the whole thing. And I think it was Gwyneth Paltrow was saying like Matt had a pizza waiting and he didn't get to eat it because they didn't make the day.
I had this exact thing happen on The Assistants because we had the shirtless scene with the guy who plays the actor. And we, it's a super independent movie. We don't have a lot of money. And the scene was in in his trailer in an RV. And I was like, we were at the end of the day and he had to be shirtless. And I was like, you know what? We're going to just push this and we'll shoot it tomorrow morning because we'll have we bring the RV wherever we go. We could just bring it to the next location. And the actor went, Steve, I need to shoot this now. I haven't eaten. I haven't drunk any water for the last 8 hours. Like, I am ready. I have abs now. We have to go shoot this. And I'm like, okay. I guess we're going to shoot this now. But needless to say, Chris Evans looks good in this scene. Not that Scarlett Johansson doesn't. And they're having this conversation. And I think, we had the scene before where we're talking about whether or not he can trust her and what is her truth. And she had been saying, well, my truth is whatever I say whenever I say it, and now she says,
when I first joined S.H.I.E.L.D., I thought I was going straight. But I guess I just traded in the KGB for Hydra. I thought I knew whose lies I was telling, but I guess I can't tell the difference anymore.
Great moment from her, I think.
And it was down to me to save your life, and you be honest with me. Would you trust me to do it?
And there's a long look, and he says,
I would now.
That's why you follow Steve Rogers.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, of course, she has to make a joke.
Well, you seem pretty chipper for someone who just found out they died for nothing.
And Sam's made them breakfast.
So the real question is, how did the two most wanted people in Washington kidnap a S.H.I.E.L.D. officer in broad daylight?
The answer is, you don't.
And this is where we find out that they thought he was a pilot, but no, actually, he's pararescue. I love the way, and of course, I know that he's going to be Falcon. In fact, the very first Captain America comic I ever got was a Cap and Falcon comic from probably 1974 or something.
Oh, wow.
But I love the way that they get to what is his superpower, which is, the wings.
I can't ask you to do this, Sam. You got out for a good reason.
Dude, Captain America needs my help. There's no better reason to get back in.
And then we cut to who do we see coming out of a building but Senator Gary Shandling.
You talk about Marvel using the things that they've used in the past. The fact that Gary Shandling popped up and he's a bad guy as well. It's like, oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just perfectly funny in this little talk about this woman he's going off to see, and perfectly a jerk. just long enough as he's talking to Sitwell. And the one important moment is as Gary Shandling is leaving, he leans into Sitwell, gives him a hug, and whispers in his ear,
Yeah.
Because he notices Sitwell is wearing a specific pin.
Yeah.
And that's how he knows, oh, you're one of my guys.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like a very smart thing for a secret organization to have a pin that visible. That seems like that would be kind of an easy, like an easy thing to figure out. Like, why are those 8 people all wearing the same pin?
Why is it this really ominous skull with 8 tentacles? Like, that's a very specific choice.
Yeah, gee whiz.
Agent Sitwell, how was lunch? I hear the crab cakes here are delicious.
I love the shot of Sam just with his brunch, holding up his orange juice, just looking casual as hell.
Yeah.
Tells him that he wants to meet with him. And he says, why would I do that? And then that laser sight pops up on Sitwell's chest and he says,
because that tie looks really expensive.
And I'd hate to mess it up.
Cut to the classic, we're on a rooftop. Sitwell's getting tossed around by Cap. And we get to the edge of the roof as he's asking him questions about what is going on and why was he on the Lumerian star.
Is this little display meant to insinuate that you're going to throw me off the roof? Because it's really not just style, Rogers.
And it's so great because it's set up. It's the perfect Batman setup. Like we've seen this in a million comic book movies. And I think we all go, yeah, that really isn't Steve Rogers' style.
You're right. It's not. It's hers.
And Natasha kicks him off the roof.
Awesome.
And what's so great too is you go like, holy crap, they kicked him off the roof and they're doing nothing. They're just chatting. We go back to this conversation about different girls that Cap might take out. And we're going, did they just kill Sitwell? Like what the, because I don't know about you, even though I know that Falcon's in the movie and I know what I had a Falcon comic book, were you thinking at this moment what was about to happen?
I don't recall if I remember. I just never. I think I remember buying that he wasn't dead, that they didn't kill him, that there's no way.
Yeah,
that would be okay. And so when Falcon showed up, I was like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But I just remember that being a cool little moment, and then no way he's dead. So yeah.
Same. I got that it was an intimidation tactic, and that whatever information they needed to get out of him, they had not gotten out of him yet. So kicking him off a roof probably wouldn't be the best course of action.
What's so great about it, I think, is that I would say, most people who aren't comic book people have heard of Captain America.
Right.
They haven't necessarily heard of Falcon or know what his powers are or what he does. And so this to me is like, we have this moment of, oh my God, what is going on? That is, the tension is released by the introduction of a new superhero. And what do you think about watching Falcons fly around? How do you feel about this effect?
I love this. I mean, this is opening up another corner of the Marvel universe, because this isn't someone who works for S.H.I.E.L.D. This isn't someone who has powers, but this is someone who is very, very skilled. This is more based off of the ultimate version of Sam Wilson, because, the original version could communicate telepathically with birds. He has a bird sidekick named Red Wing, who then makes an appearance in the MCU in the form of a drone, which I think was really, really smart. But yeah, I think just making him a soldier who happens to be very, very specialized in this one particular skill, I thought was a really smart move. And Falcons, when he's got the wing suit on, his action sequences are some of my favorite in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Well, and in all of the science fiction fake ways of making people able to fly, like, Iron Man's, pulsars and all your repulsors, all that kind of stuff. This is the one that I want. I want Falcon's wings. That looks like so much damn fun. If you could actually make that work, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
What I love about the suit, and again, this is where we buy into the science fictionness of the story. What I love about the suit is when you look at it, it straps around his waist. It doesn't go to below his legs. So physically, like a jetpack on your back, you would not be able to keep yourself upright. If anything, the thing might just be dragging you along, but it looks awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with Iron Man. It's like none of that makes any sense at all. But it's but as long as they convince us, And it's so interesting that if they use gravity well and they show kind of a physicality and they give it weight, that we go, okay, I buy that. Even though the more you think about it, it's like, well, I don't think this is really going to work. And now, of course, Sitwell is singing up a storm, and we hear that this Zola's algorithm is allowing them to target anybody who might do anything wrong. And his list is
you, the TV anchor in Cairo, the Undersecretary of Defense, a high school valedictorian in Iowa City, Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange, anyone who's a threat to Hydra.
That was the first time Stephen Strange had been mentioned in the MCU.
Oh.
Yeah. And I don't know who the high school valedictorian was, but I thought I remembered it was supposed to be somebody, but I wasn't sure. Shannon, do you know? I don't remember.
No, because Peter would be
a
freshman at this point.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Or maybe in 8th grade. The one that stood out to me was the TV anchor in Cairo, because you hear Cairo and you automatically think Moon Knight. And it's like, well, I don't think one of his personalities, reads the news.
So the consensus was that it was supposed to be Amadeus Cho, who was the valedictorian in Iowa City, but I don't know if they went forward with that or if that's just something they're keeping for now until later. So,
I don't think Riri Williams had been introduced in the comics yet.
Right.
So it wouldn't have been her.
So by the way, I think this is, we talk about fan service, and I think this kind of thing is perfect. This is perfect because Shannon, you've had to do this a lot of time. A lot of times when you're writing, I just have to write a list of things. And those things aren't necessarily important. You just have to have a list. But because we're in the MCU, now we have a list where most people will go right by them, and that's totally fine. And for other people, they will dig into their comic book collection to try to figure out who those people are. And I think that's great.
Well, this is the Crossbones thing. Like, originally Crossbones was written as just a henchman, but being able, like, at this point in the MCU, being able to go in and find those little gems that you can then insert and make part of this larger universe. That's one of the fun things. Now it's gotten to the point where the characters that they're adding don't necessarily add to the story and make the story feel a little strained. But at this point in the MCU, this was really fun.
Well, to me, it's where the cart is driving the horse. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, if I have a great movie and I have a moment in my movie where I can insert a little thing that will give, some geek somewhere a special little tingle, that's great. But if all I'm going is like, I mustn't have all of these 97 things introduced, well, then I don't have a great movie anymore.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they mention is that it's not just that they're killing bad guys, is that they're killing people that are going to be a threat in the future, because Zola's algorithm allows them to go on digitally and figure out every single thing about us, what we're going to do, and then kill us based on that.
Well, yeah, just the name checking of Stephen Strange, you think at this point, Stephen Strange is just a cocky surgeon, but he's going to be able to fix people in a way that they maybe don't want fixed. So what's the best way to take out an injured individual is to take out the person that would fix them.
So they're not going after Stephen Strange because he's Doctor Strange.
No, because he's not Doctor Strange.
He is Doctor Strange, obviously.
Well, yeah. He's not the magical Doctor Strange yet.
Interesting. And then there's this moment, which I think is great, where Sitwell's realization that he's going to get killed. Like, he just gave it all up. We cut to them driving, and there's a bunch of talk about how they're going to break in and DNA scans and all this stuff, none of which is terribly important, because something lands on the roof, and super fast that metal arm reaches in through the window, grabs Sitwell, and just tosses him straight into a truck. So I think that's it for him.
Yeah, until they go back in time in Endgame.
And then again, we're into another practical effects action sequence that's so exciting and thrilling and well done. But one thing I should say, and John, you will appreciate this, is that this action sequence, the Russo brothers, who are referencing films throughout, like they're movie geeks.
Yeah,
this is inspired by the bank heist in Heat.
Oh wow, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, they wanted that feeling, and you can see it kind of in the way it's all shot, that it feels sort of like that. There's like a Humvee behind them that rams into them. Bucky flips over the top, landing on the car. He rips open the roof, and then he rips the steering wheel out of the car. They're getting pushed into the side, and then Cap grabs them, and as the car is flipping, pulls them out, slides with Natasha. We have Sam, who's rolling around on the freeway. It's like super, super chaotic. And then it just goes and goes nonstop.
Yeah.
I love too that the Winter Soldier has his bad guy henchmen who, just hand him weapons when they're supposed to. They hand him a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
He shoots Cap, who goes flying off of this overpass down into a bus down below. And then Natasha shoots the Winter Soldier in his goggles and he takes them off. And now we get the first reveal of his eyes. And you mentioned earlier how much acting Sebastian Stan has to do just with his eyes, Shannon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the first time we see his eyes is we see him on the roof when he catches the shield. But this is the first time I think we kind of see them in the daylight, because we also see them in Pierce's house. But this is the first time you see them in the daylight, and amongst the chaos and how dynamic the whole sequence is, just the deadness and that, like, just the MMA cold dead stare in his eyes as he rips the goggles off and goes back into the action.
Yeah, I also kind of read that he's a little shaken by the fact that he was shot in the eye, because it could have killed him, like if it had gone through. Do you know what I'm saying? And so there's a moment there where he kind of accepts that possibility and then, as you said, just goes back into motion, But I think they pause on that for a reason, beyond just recognizing that it's him, because we all know that it's him by the shield moment. But the fact that he's just kind of has this moment of like, whoa, that almost happened, and then gets back in the fray. It's a quick moment of humanity, which I think helps for the audience to see that this guy is, as we're going to see later on, this guy, he's not fully 100% under their control,
Interesting. That is, I take it he's still the machine at that point.
Yeah. I have much more Shannon's reaction. To me, and this is what's, it's literally a shot of a dude's eyes as he takes off goggles, and yet we can interpret it different ways, because to me, it's like the relentlessness of I'm just going to keep going is how I'm feeling when I see that moment.
As you guys were talking, I just rewatched the bridge scene. So I will defend my position, and I will say, because when he gets shot, he stops, and there's like 3 seconds where he stops and then slowly removes the glasses, and then he is dead behind the eyes. But the stopping, the stillness, that's the moment that is the realization I could have been killed here in this moment. And so I will defend my position saying those 3 seconds were on purpose, so that you saw that this guy, well, it's like the Russian being cut in Rocky IV. Like, this guy can be gotten to. So it's a moment of vulnerability and humanity. But, I just wanted to defend my position a little more strongly.
I think, we put this out to the Cine-Files out there. I think you should check out this moment, because it's a perfect example of how we can interpret films in different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, I'll have to go look at it again now, because now I don't know. And speaking of keeping going, he's going after Natasha. He doesn't see her, hears something, pulls out this ball, rolls it under this car. We know this thing is going to blow up. Yeah. So we are going, he's got Natasha. He's going to blow her up. And it rolls to where he see her cell phone talking, and we go, she's tricked him, which is cool. And she jumps on his back. She's got that garrote, and he tosses her off. And he's just about to fire at her when she has some little disc that she throws, hits his arm, that disables his arm for a moment, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's running away, and there's a shot of, it seems like a bullet going through a car window that hits her. And her going down, I think it's a great moment of weakness and vulnerability, and her getting shot in that moment, the way they filmed it.
Yeah, I mean, she talks about being shot before, like how he shoots through her when she was protecting some asset. He shoots through her, but it didn't hit any vital bits. Like the shot was meant to go through her to take out the asset. The shot in the shoulder is like, okay, now she is compromised. Now she is not 100% the fighter that she could be. She's lost an arm, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the Winter Soldier pretty much has her dead to rights. And then here comes Cap, and we get the fight that we've been waiting for. And it is fast, and it is aggressive, and it is violent, and you can see the power of both of them.
Yeah.
The training of both of them as they're dropping weapons. And first Bucky has the shield, and then Cap has the shield, and then knives are coming out, and there's flips, and they're tossing each other. It's a super, super exciting action sequence.
Yeah, Sebastian Stan talked about with that knife play, that the amount of work that he had to do, that he would be out with his friends with this plastic knife, just twirling and twirling and twirling. I mean, the amount of shots where he's able to it goes up in the air in one hand, he catches it in the other. I mean, we see something similar to that in Shang-Chi later, where he gets the dagger from the bad guy, from the Death Dealer. But watching as the Winter Soldier is able to kind of go back and forth, and the fact that a lot of this is Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan. Like you can see how much work they put into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am assuming that I have spent more time than you two playing around with weapons, trying to figure out how to twirl them and spin them and drop them and throw them and stuff.
Sure.
And
yes.
And I spent, in my youth, many, many hours trying to do this stuff. A lot of the stuff they're doing is so hard, particularly in the middle of combat, dropping that knife from one hand to another, like those kinds of things while all this other stuff is going on. And of course, I mean, the magic of movies, they only had to do it right once.
Right.
You don't have to, but still, that's a tremendous amount of training and practice. I know both of you have done fight choreography in plays. And my assumption is if none of them were remotely as complicated as what Cap and the Winter Soldier are doing here,
Well, Steve, when I played Charlie Chaplin at Universal Studios Japan, when I had to twirl my cane, it was definitely Winter Soldier level. I really wish I had footage of that.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I had like limited hand-to-hand combat training in the military for sure, but it was not something that I was constantly keeping up on and constantly focused on. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you guys. Like, you have more experience.
Yeah, but what I will say is you have actual training in military hand-to-hand combat.
Well, sure.
Whereas I'm good at spinning a stick.
You've got martial arts training for years, so
Sure,
you can use that combined with the weapon, I would imagine, to deliver a better fight than I could.
You were trained to make contact, though, Johnny.
Exactly. Plus, also guns.
Yes, guns. Yes, right. Yes.
But the fight continues to escalate, and then in a moment of high intensity, suddenly that mask comes out, and you see that it's Bucky.
Yeah.
And you see Cap see that it's Bucky. And there's just this total pause in the fighting. And I am 100% certain that Bucky has a reaction to seeing Steve in this moment, too.
Yes.
Because if he didn't, he would just go right back to fighting. But he pauses, too. They both pause.
It's interesting because the way the Russos shoot it, it's almost like Michael Bay. They shoot it from behind and they shoot it from below and spin around.
Yeah.
Chris Evans. So it's such a great little moment. It shows you how that move can be used in a different way. It's not about making him look cool. It's about making him look like his world is completely knocked off its axis because of him seeing Bucky out of nowhere for the first time in decades.
Bucky? Who the hell is Bucky?
And then Sam flies in, knocks him over. Bucky fires. There's a rocket explosion, and then Bucky is gone.
Well, I like the way that they shot Sam coming in, that it was a little not completely under control. Because we don't know how long at this point Sam has been out. And like it wasn't just, grabbing Sitwell, flying him back on. This is a combat situation.
Yeah.
And you see like, I might be a little rusty here. And again, these wings are used for pararescue. So it's like, get the people in and get them out. Whereas this is the first time, in my head at least, I'm like, he's having to go on the attack. And this is not something that maybe he might be a little rusty here.
And now they are surrounded by agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., including Rumo, and it looks like they're getting arrested.
Yeah.
They got him. And part of this, I think, is if Steve hadn't just seen Bucky, maybe they would have gotten away. But I think he's so wrecked by what's just happened that he doesn't know what to do.
He looked right at me. He didn't even know me.
How's that even possible? It was like 70 years ago.
And he figures out that it might have been Zola's experiments that allowed Bucky to survive. And they're telling him, none of that is your fault, Steve. And he says, and I think this is a great line.
Even when I had nothing, I had Bucky.
And that in contrast to today, when he really feels like he has nothing.
Yeah, right. So to have Bucky back into his life, yeah.
And of course, Natasha was shot, and they're worried she's going to bleed out. And one of these guards pulls out that same Sparky thing that Nick Fury had, and takes out all the other guards, and we see that it's Agent Hill. And so they escape.
GSW, she's lost at least a pint.
Maybe two.
Let me take her. She'll want to see him first.
And the camera pulls back to reveal Nick Fury's alive, guys. Can you believe it?
And we also get the first appearance of Joe Russo, don't we, as the doctor?
As the
doctor. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. And it ends up that they pulled a McCoy in mock time where he didn't give Kirk a triox compound, but gave him another drug that simulated death. And that is what has happened.
Can't kill you if you're already dead. Besides, I wasn't sure who to trust.
And he looks at Natasha when he says it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here's my note here, Shannon, is explain why that's great writing. Why is it great writing for him to say that line and turn to Natasha?
Because it is a consolidation of page space, one.
Yes.
That you don't have to have a whole bunch of dialogue. Just the idea that she has dealt with it. Can she or can she not be trusted? All he has to say, I didn't know who I could trust. And with a look, with one line of action, he looks at Natasha. You understand where the character is.
Well, and it plays into Natasha's whole story of her not knowing who she is or whether or not she could trust S.H.I.E.L.D. or if she's fighting. So all of those ideas, like all of the themes that we were playing in this movie, in that one line and that look, all come to the fore, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and also the whole idea of trust, it really builds on when and this is an easy thing to poke holes in the MCU, when you have an individual hero story, is like, why don't you call the Avengers? It's like, Steve doesn't know who he can call. Thor's off the planet. He's not talking with Bruce. Like, can he call Tony Stark? He doesn't have a great relationship with Tony Stark. Is Tony Stark possibly involved with this? I can't call anybody. I have the one who is trying to save Nick, and I have a guy who has not been on the board in the past. Yeah. So that idea of you don't know who you can trust throughout the whole movie is really prevalent.
Now we cut to this strange green, yellow lit lab vault sort of structure. And this was just a bank vault they found in Cleveland. This is an actual location that they lit, and it looks so cool. And there we have Bucky, who's in this chair, and they're working on his arm, and he's now ripped. This in the schedule was, this is your shirts off scene. You know? And he's obviously kind of lost it. He's choking people. He's violent. He's not quite in control. And in comes Pierce, and they're warning him to stay away because Bucky's not safe. And Pierce goes right towards him, asks for a mission report, and then he hits Bucky when he doesn't get the answer that he wants.
It's a man on the bridge. Who was he?
So Bucky is remembering a little bit. And then Pierce sits down and gives this speech, impassioned speech about how Bucky, or the Winter Soldier, has changed the world and making the world a better place. And then rather than going, okay, good, he says,
but I knew him.
So he's starting to come back, and Pierce thinks for a moment and says,
prep him.
He's been out of cryo freeze too long.
Then wipe him and start over.
That little line, wipe him and start over, tells you so much about what Bucky's life has been for the last 70 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also how their technology has issues, because clearly they've wiped him a couple times, but the memories keep coming back. So, you know, there's this feeling of like, well, no matter how much they try to do it, it'll never fully work, but it works enough to get him back to this place where we can manipulate him. But clearly these memories are so strong within him. The desire to not do the things that he's doing is so strong within him that those memories, in some very small place inside his mind, he keeps those memories alive because he knows somewhere inside this programming, he is still Bucky Barnes, you know, a hero, World War II hero. So,
well, and this is something the comic addresses as well. Like there are like you go into more of that 70 years of Bucky occasionally kind of going off mission, like going places that he doesn't understand why he's going. So they get to address it a little bit more. And I think one of the scientists in the scene, I think it is Ed Brubaker, the guy who created the Winter Soldier, and he's talked about before how much more money he made in residuals from Captain America: The Winter Soldier than he ever made for creating the Winter Soldier character.
That's one of the sad things about the way comics are created is, like, you know, the people who maybe should get the credit and the money frequently don't.
Yeah.
Like particularly when in this case is that there's some protection now. There didn't used to be at all, where if you create a character, then you have some piece of that character going forward. But what if you take a character that someone else created and you make that character really cool, which happens all the time in comics? Well, you didn't create the character. You're just the person that is why everyone's paying attention to that character.
It's a great point, because like with Kraven's Last Stand, Kraven was always a good Spider-Man villain, but it wasn't until Last Stand that Kraven became this like iconic Spider-Man villain. So that's an excellent point, Steve.
Well, I'm sure I said this before in the show, is that Otis Redding's "Try a Little Tenderness," which is one of the great, fantastic songs of all time. Anybody today who does "Try a Little Tenderness" is doing Otis Redding's version of it.
Yeah.
But "Try a Little Tenderness" is a standard. Bing Crosby had a #1 hit with it in 1936.
Yeah.
And nobody's doing Bing Crosby version. The whole like C section of the music where it just goes off, that's all Otis.
Yeah.
And Otis and his family get nothing because he didn't write it. It's not his song, Anyway, the last moment, by the way, is they put the mouthpiece in and they set him in to lean him back, and he goes through this hugely painful thing. The Russos were thinking about Han Solo getting frozen in carbonite in Empire. That's what they were referencing.
Wow.
We're back with Nick Fury. By the way, this set is a real location. It was a sewage treatment plant in Cleveland. Looked great.
Oh, wow.
They scouted it in the middle of winter, and it had no smell at all. Perfectly fine. They shot it in the middle of summer when it was 85 degrees. It smelled so terrible that everybody threw away all their clothes. Everybody who worked on this movie had to throw away the clothes that they used when they were on this set.
Wow.
So not only was it a treatment plant, it was an active treatment plant.
Yeah, that is a fire your location scout, because that is a real bad mistake.
Yeah. Jesus.
So now we talk more about what the plan is, which is that once they launch these helicarriers, they become fully weaponized, they hook up with the satellites, and then they're going to start taking people out.
We need to breach those carriers and replace their targeting blades with our own.
1 or 2 won't cut it. We need to link all 3 carriers for this to work, because if even one of those ships remains operational, a whole lot of people are going to die.
So, okay, that's our plan.
Yep.
Get these chips in there. And then Nick says, if we do all this, maybe we can just salvage what's left. Because Nick still wants to save S.H.I.E.L.D., which makes sense because he spent his whole life building it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the captain takes over.
I love it.
We're not salvaging anything. We're not just taking down the carriers, Nick. We're taking down S.H.I.E.L.D.
S.H.I.E.L.D. had nothing to do with it.
You gave me this mission. This is how it ends. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been compromised. You said so yourself. Hydra grew right under your nose and nobody noticed.
Why do you think we're meeting in this cave? I noticed.
How many paid the price before you did?
So what do you think of Steve Rogers in this moment?
I love this. He's Captain America, but as you just said, Steve, a couple of seconds ago, the captain part sometimes gets forgotten. Yes, he leads, but Tony's always kind of undercutting him in certain moments. But you get these moments where he really does take command, like that scene in Avengers when the cops roll up on him and he's telling them what to do. And he's like, why should I listen to you? And he kicks 3 of those guys' asses, 3 of those aliens' asses. And the guy he immediately turns around and starts doing all the directions the Cap gave him to do. And so there are these occasional moments, which I think is smart from the MCU. You don't want to overdo it with the captain part of Captain America. And this moment here is really poignant because it's a switching of power in their relationship, right? Steve's always been, I'm tired of being Nick Fury's errand boy or his cleanup boy or mop-up boy, whatever he says on the ship. Here's the moment where he turns the tables and says to him, oh, no, we're burning it all to the fucking ground because I was right and you were wrong.
Yep.
This thing that you're doing is wrong. And I knew it, and I knew it. And so we're doing that. And Nick has to accept it because in the end, he knows he can rebuild S.H.I.E.L.D. maybe later in some other version, as we see in the MCU he does with S.W.O.R.D. But like in that moment, he has to accept that this is the only way they're going to make it happen. And the only way Cap will help him, because I think Cap would have walked away from this if he can't burn the whole thing to the ground.
Well, and also Fury looks to Natasha and he looks to Hill for support. And he was not honest with them. Yeah. He kept things from them. In his mind's eye, he kept things from them maybe for, the greater good, but they know they can trust Steve Rogers. And it's like, we're going with that guy's plan.
Yeah, and I almost think he looks at Sam like in a "come on, brother, help me out" kind of moment. And Sam goes, "Don't look at me, man. I just do what he does, only slower." And I love that line. Such a great line, because they have no relationship. Why would he look at Sam at all? But he was trying in some desperate way to get some help there.
Just that line, "I do what he does, only slower," is so great on so many levels, and because one of them, I think, is what we've been talking about throughout, which is they're both soldiers.
Yeah.
Like, so that he does do what he does, which is that he's a soldier defending what's right.
Right.
The end of the scene is great with Nick realizing he has no help in the room and says,
"Looks like you're giving the orders now, Captain."
And the camera pushes in on Steve, and we're like, okay, Captain America's back. I want to highlight one other moment in this scene, which is Nick says, "Look, I didn't know about Bucky." Is that true?
No. I don't think it's true. I think Nick will say, just like when he threw Coulson's cards on the fucking table, I think Nick will say whatever he needs to say because he always thinks he's thinking of the greater good, and he doesn't like to unsettle anyone if he doesn't have to unsettle anyone. So I think he knew about it or had heard about it because I just can't believe, especially the Isaiah Bradley, there's no way he hadn't found some information on that. So I don't believe him in this moment. Now, in retrospect, when I first saw the movie, I did believe him. But now, after all that's happened, I don't believe him in this moment.
I believe him.
Okay.
Because at this point, how would he know the identity of this Hydra assassin? That's kind of my thought. And as well as Natasha, most of the intelligence community thinks it's a ghost story. So the fact that they've never been able to nail down that many facts tells me that Nick probably did not know that this is Steve Rogers' old best friend.
Well, actually, now we can split what knowing means into a lot of levels, because I agree with that I don't think that he knew that the Winter Soldier was Bucky necessarily. But I do think he knew about the Winter Soldier.
Yeah,
absolutely. He knew that there was this person who had been used, and he knew that it was, and I bet he knew that it started with Hydra, because there's another question as well. He could not know that the Winter Soldier is Bucky and know that Pierce or S.H.I.E.L.D. has used the Winter Soldier to do some of their dirty work. You know what I mean? Like Pierce is using the Winter Soldier to do stuff.
Yeah.
Did Nick know that this person had been, because, and this relates to another important question, which is that he says it's obvious that Nick knew about Zola, right?
Yeah.
So he knew that Hydra asset was taken. He knew that he created this thing. He knew about Insight. Like the degree of difference between where Nick Fury is and where Pierce is actually really small. Because he must have known that algorithm was about finding out what people are going to do in the future and killing them before they did it.
Yeah.
How many of them he would execute, we don't know,
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to be cynical, this is all about Nick Fury being upset that someone got to his toy before he did. Someone got to use his toy before he did. In essence, you could argue that in a really cynical point of view.
Shannon is just thinking, and I see the wheels turning.
Because I don't think that Fury would know that Alexander Pierce used the Winter Soldier.
That's fair.
That would be my guess, because again, knowing that this famous assassin was under their purview makes me think that he potentially would have wanted to have used the Winter Soldier for something. So that's kind of my thought. And actually rewatching the movie, that scene that he talks about with Steve at the beginning when they're looking at the helicarriers for the first time, when he says, we're going to be able to take off take a lot of threats off the board before they even happen, is if things had gone according to plan with Nick Fury, do these carriers kill 2 million people?
I think I think the difference between Pierce and Nick Fury is just of degrees. I think the carriers do go up and they do kill people under Nick Fury, just not as many and more carefully. Otherwise, why build them?
Strategic targets.
They are specifically built to take out people in a specific way based on this algorithm.
Yeah.
You know?
Does Nick know about, he knows about the algorithm. Does he know it's Zola?
I think he has to.
It's a good question. I don't know if he knows about the algorithm. I don't know if he knows that Zola is part of the algorithm. But I was watching for an hour of First Avenger last night. Just happened to be on TNT, and I just watched the interrogation scene with Zola and Tommy Lee Jones. So clearly, it's meant to reference those Nazi scientists who came over to help build the bomb. So I think it's very possible that Nick knows. I don't think, obviously the three of us can't 100% say yes or no, but like, I think it's within the realm of possibility that Nick knows that Zola is connected to the algorithm, but I don't think he knows that Zola is actually alive in the algorithm in a way like he is in the bunker. I don't think Nick has access to any of that or knowledge of that, but I think he knows Zola was connected to the algorithm. I think that's very possible.
Yeah, like Nick knows that there were a number of enemy scientists who they brought over with Operation Paperclip. The idea that one of them is still existing in digital form, I would say he doesn't know.
Right. And there's and I want to say this correctly because I don't want people to get upset, but there's an American hubris or an American arrogance to think that, okay, they came over to us and we're going to use them and they're going to be thankful for it. And they're not going to, cross any lines or try to create a shadow government or shadow faction underneath our noses. They would never do that. But that's why they get caught out because they're so, they're so in this place of believing in themselves so much that they don't notice that this is all happening right under their noses, and which Steve calls them out on, calls Nick out on, which I think is a good, strong moment too for him.
I know we're on a sort of a long digression, but I actually feel like it's really it's important. And I just in talking about Nick Fury, let me ask just this question: has Nick Fury hired assassins to kill people for S.H.I.E.L.D.?
100%.
If Nick Fury was aware of a really good assassin that he could use to kill people for S.H.I.E.L.D., would he use that person to do dirty work if he thought it would be effective?
Yes.
Yeah. I think if he knew he could control him, yes.
So he might not have known about the Winter Soldier, but if he had known about the Winter Soldier, he would have used him to kill people.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
Quite possibly.
I mean, an assassin is what Hawkeye was.
Yeah, right.
I mean, his job was to go assassinate Natasha.
Right.
Right. And this is where the MCU gets away with this, right? Because we're catching Natasha and Clint after they've done all the stuff that they did for Nick Fury, after quote unquote Budapest and all of that, after everything, all these other missions. So we don't know how many people he sent Natasha to go in and kill and how many people we sent Clint to go in and kill. But this idea that they're all squeaky clean because they're quote unquote superheroes is nonsense. You know what I'm saying? This is espionage. And I think this film is supposed to make you kind of rethink this whole situation. It's supposed to clearly mirror the American foreign policy approach and intelligence approach and secret approach that they've had for many years, destabilizing governments. That whole montage that Zola delivers, in essence, you could look at what we've done in our actual history if you go deep enough, and you'll see all the stuff that we did in foreign countries in order to keep us as a world superpower. And I'm not judging one way or the other. I'm just saying that's a fact. And so so Nick Fury using an assassin, I think he would absolutely use an assassin that would be a super soldier assassin if he needed it in order to accomplish the mission. And so, there's a past histories here. If we wanted to explore with these characters that would be unsavory and uncomfortable for a lot of fans of the MCU, in my opinion.
There's a line, it's a Bob Dylan quote, which I first learned because Alan Moore uses it in Watchmen. And the quote is, "In order to live outside the law, you must be honest." And I've always loved that quote.
Yeah.
And I love it for so many reasons. To me, it relates to like our weird conversation when I was saying about whether or not I got a permit to shoot a building, against the rules. Yeah. And we were talking about whether or not you color within the lines or you break the rules.
Yeah.
And that quote of, "In order to live outside the law, you must be honest," is like saying, well, once you decide to break the rules, then you take the morality onto yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have the rules to keep me on the straight and narrow. I'm deciding for myself. Nick Fury, we like him and we think he's a good person deep down.
Right.
But he must be honest. You know, if you're going to go around he has to be right for assassinating that person. It has to turn out the right way. And I don't think we should, you know, in the real world, we should not trust Nick Fury's because we're all not because he's not trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
He could be totally trying to do the right thing and still I'm doing the wrong thing, you know?
Yeah.
Which actually, now that I think about it, that is a huge theme in the Marvel Universe because when we get to Avengers Age of Ultron, that's Tony Stark trying to do the right thing.
Oh, this is absolutely a dry run for Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing because
same plot, yeah.
To build that whole fucking thing, yeah.
We're out on this dam, and Steve has this flashback back to Skinny Steve with Bucky, and it's obvious it's after his mother has died, and it is totally there to set up a line of dialogue that we're going to have come back later in the movie, but it's still a really good scene. I love that Steve doesn't want to take Bucky's help.
I know what you're going to say, Buck. We can put the couch cushions on the floor like when we were kids. It'll be fun. All you gotta do is shine my shoes, maybe take out the trash.
Steve is still that stubborn person. He doesn't want to take help. He says,
"Thank you, Buck. But I can get by on my own."
The thing is, you don't have to. I'm with you to the end of the line, pal.
So then Sam comes up and he's talking about Bucky and he says,
"The guy he is now, I don't think he's the kind you save. He's the kind you stop."
Which is a great line.
Yeah.
And we get to this thing of that Steve doesn't know he can do that. And he says,
"I don't know if I can do that."
Well, he might not give you a choice. He doesn't know you.
He will.
There's certain films where there's an inevitability to them. You know where the movie has to go. And yet, even though it's not actually surprising when we get there, if it's set up really well, it still totally 100% works. And that's what this movie is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then Sam asks, the tag on the scene is,
"You gonna wear that?"
No. If you're gonna fight a war, you gotta wear a uniform.
Cut to, which I think, is this the best Stan Lee cameo in the MCU? It's one of my favorites. There's some other good ones. There's some terrible ones as well. But this one's really good because we see him as the security guard at the Smithsonian. And he says,
"Oh, man. I am so fired."
And we see the naked mannequin.
I will say this: that SOB could act. Like his cameos almost always work. Yeah, so there are a couple that are a little cheesy, but they almost always work. You know, and I thought this one was so believable that he would have a reaction like this. It was so great.
I mean, his first Avenger cameo. I mean, he's the punchline to the joke.
Right.
I mean, it's him dressed up as the general, and they introduce Captain America, and the guy's assistant comes out. I was like, I thought he'd be taller. But this one also, I mean, you know, playing that, oh boy, I'm in trouble. But like he does it great.
And we cut to Sam and Cap in the World War II uniform, looking at the Shield building, and this is planning on a movie-wide scale. Because they wanted this moment to pop. And to do so, they made sure the entire color palette of the whole movie up to this point was extremely desaturated. There's no big blues or reds, bright colors anywhere in this whole film, really, so that when he shows up in that World War II uniform, it looks totally different and pops out. You know?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and this choice to put him in that uniform too, like it serves a couple of purposes. I mean, it's not just that he had to ditch the other uniform, so he does need something to wear, but it's also this is the uniform Bucky might remember.
Oh, good point. Oh,
that is a great point.
That. Oh, yeah.
Totally. I hadn't thought about that either, but that is a great point.
Yeah.
We cut to SHIELD headquarters. And there is the character, which is Cameron Kline, played by Aaron Himmelstein, who acted for me in The Assistants.
Oh!
He plays Ben in The Assistants. He's a great actor. He stole a lot of scenes. So really, it was super cool for me seeing him pop up in this movie in a part that ends up being kind of a critical part.
Yeah.
A critical role, and he goes on to make future MCU appearances.
Yep. Robert Redford welcomes the council back, and he gives them some sort of technology that will get them through all the security or something. We're with some radio-ish guys at S.H.I.E.L.D., and there's this loud screeching sound.
Must be the dish. I'll check it out.
And there is Danny Pudi from Community in his little cameo, and he opens up the door to see Cap and Sam. Redford is making a speech. And then in the midst of his speech, we hear coming over the PA system,
Attention all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. This is Steve Rogers. You've heard a lot about me over the last few days. Some of you were even ordered to hunt me down. But I think it's time you know the truth.
and he makes a great Captain America speech. My favorite moment after he says, you know, this has been taken over by Hydra, and Pierce is their leader, and there's a reaction that goes around all the rooms in S.H.I.E.L.D. as they realize they can't trust anyone around them. And then he says,
the price of freedom is high. It always has been. And it's a price I'm willing to pay. And if I'm the only one, then so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not.
It's the guy you follow.
Yes, and these speeches, I mean, I think this is a testament to Chris Evans, because these speeches are very easy to kind of go into saccharine territory. But the way that Chris Evans delivers this, very straight down the middle, doesn't put a whole lot on it. But again, as you said, Steve, this is the guy you follow. And there's a great when he name checks Alexander Pierce and they're in the World Security Council, there's a great shot of Robert Redford looking at the rest of the members where he kind of gives a little shrug like, yeah, you got me.
Yeah, that's absolutely what he said. It was just like, all right, bitch, let's dance. It just, it really is like, well, got me.
And the button
on confidence, you know.
Exactly. And the button on the scene is Sam says,
did you write that down first? Or was it off the top of your head?
Gentlemen, did Cap figure this speech out first, or was it off the top of his head?
Oh, totally off the top.
How can I say it? I would say that he probably thought about it as they were heading over there and how he was going to put it together. But then let the inspiration come and the moment take him and delivered what he delivered. So, yeah, it feels spur of the moment, but he might have maybe thought of a few points he wanted to say. Because, I mean, it'd be foolish. He's a soldier. You got to come prepared. So as a soldier, and he knows he's got to recruit these people who were former co-workers of his, like, what, a week ago? And so he's got to be able to win them over. And so how can I deliver this speech to win them over? So I think there's nothing wrong with thinking that he prepared it because he's a soldier, and you always want to go prepared into any battle, whether it's verbal or physical. You know,
I totally think he had the bullet points. I don't know, you know, like I think he had worked out the beats that he needed to get through.
I think he had the beats in so much that they were part of the plan. I don't think like, hey, if I get a microphone, here's what I'm planning on saying, because the amount of speeches that he gives in the MCU and the amount of times it is then commented on that he's really good at that. Shit, maybe you guys are right.
We're back in the council chamber, and one of the council members is angry, and guards are coming in, and he goes, arrest him, expecting them to arrest Alexander Pierce. No, the guards are on Pierce's side. And then Rumo comes into that control room, goes up to Cameron, my actor from The Assistants, and tells him to launch the helicarriers. Yeah. He doesn't do anything.
Is there a problem? Sorry, sir.
I think, I mean, it's, you know, I like the guy, and he acted for me. So maybe I'm biased. I think Aaron does a fantastic job in this scene.
It's a great bit of nonverbal acting. It's a great bit of nonverbal acting until he says what he says. There's a couple lines like, no, and then, but because you can tell that he's struggling with his conscience and his fear that he's going to be killed if he doesn't do this. So he's like coming to terms with it quickly. And that's not easy to do on camera. And it's not easy to do believably on camera, these little micro movements. And I think he does an incredible job of letting you feel the weight of what this kid is navigating as he makes this defiant stand.
Because he's not a hero. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what's in his head is like, I'm not supposed to be, I'm the guy at the computer, you know? And then you could see that realization of like, oh, I know what the right thing is. The right thing might get me killed. And him saying,
I'm not going to launch those ships. Captain's orders.
Well, and look, you can strip it all the way back. right, to this kid being interviewed, right? He wanted to work at S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, he worked hard. He wanted to be recruited. He probably worked on his resume like over and over and over and over again. Probably submitted it 8-10 different times before he finally got the interview. Was able to get the job. He's excited about the job, and he's hoping he does well. He's working with these superheroes that he's fallen in love with and he respects, but he's also doing good in the world because he's bought into the myth of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then this moment comes where all of that kind of comes crashing down on him. And how are you going to react? And so, I just think it's fantastic. Those little moments, they don't win Oscars. They don't win people Oscars, but they make the film so much more effective.
And I think something in his position, this is never a decision he was supposed to make.
Right.
And this speaks to him, even though it is a smaller character, this speaks to the depth that not just the performer, but also the writers gave to this character.
Yeah.
Is that he's hitting keys when he's told to hit the keys, and that's it. And you see he gets to that fork in the road and he sides with the good guys.
Yeah.
Well, and this is, what we mean with show don't tell is like Steve makes this speech that introduces this idea of I'm willing to risk my life for it. I don't know. And if I have to do it alone, I will, but I bet some of you will too. And then this is the demonstration of the idea that Steve put forward. We see it actual in action. Yes, at least this one guy, he is willing to die. And then Rumo pulls his gun on this kid, and then Sharon pulls her gun and says,
like he said. Captain's orders.
And then Rumo drops his gun and then quickly draws a knife, cutting her. And I didn't even notice this at first. I had to rewatch it to see it. He cuts her and he catches her gun as she drops it.
Yeah.
Which is a badass move. And then everyone opens fire. And my friend Aaron, fortunately, hides under the desk. So he's cool
to stay alive.
But they do launch the ships. And the way, again, it's just, how do we make this cooler? Because we have these huge water, these huge ponds that drain out in order to make the opening to launch the helicarriers, which looks super cool.
Hey, Cap, how do we know the good guys from the bad guys? If they're shooting at you, they're bad.
And Falcon takes off, and Cap jumps off the platform and lands on the runway. And again, now we have incredible flying in this sequence from Falcon. We have Cap continually taking out guys. And then we have Redford.
What if Pakistan marched into Mumbai tomorrow, and you knew that they were going to drag your daughters into a soccer stadium for execution, and you could just stop it with a flick of the switch? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you all?
The council member's response, which I love, is he drops the glass and says, "Not if it was your switch."
Yeah.
But I just want to point out, and I won't spend a ton of time on it, this is the argument we hear all the time. And if you watched any season of 24 back in the day, this was always what the plot was. Is, the first season was there's this nuclear bomb, and it was always, we know that guy knows where the nuclear bomb is or whatever the threat is, and so I'm going to torture him or whatever I have to do to find the information.
Right.
And and with that as the scenario, if you are 100% certain, would you do whatever this horrible thing is, like use the insight thing to kill all these people? Yeah. Well, the answer is generally, yeah, if I was 100% certain. We're never 100% certain.
Right.
I just want to make this so, there's how many people are in prison. There's the Innocence Project, where they're getting people who were falsely in prison. And those people had trials and investigations, and they still got it wrong. There was right when we were leaving Afghanistan, and there was the bombing, which ended up just killing a whole bunch of people in a family because we said that was a terrorist, and we were wrong. There are so many examples of us being wrong. And right now, and I'm not going to go into the politics of it, but if you believe that someone can tell absolutely certain that somebody has committed a crime with no real investigation and police work, that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not that we're always wrong, but we can't be 100% right.
And I think this is why the Russo brothers gave the line to Pierce. Because I think they agree with you, which is why they gave that line to Pierce. Because he's the villain. And that's how a villain would think, to try to convince people using an argument like this that has a lot of fallacy to it.
And then the female member of the council suddenly jumps into motion and takes a whole bunch of people out.
Excuse me. That's Jenny a gutter? That is not the female member. That's Logan's Run. That's American Werewolf in London. Put some respect on her name, please.
I apologize, sir. Again, you know how I was just saying you cannot trust anyone that they get everything right? I believe we have provided a perfect example that even someone who is carefully researching and trying to do a really good job is going to make mistakes and omit things and screw things up.
And Steve does a wonderful job researching. I'm just giving him shit.
I know, but actually, I'm totally. I hate fucking up, as you know.
Yeah.
But I'm totally glad that I did, because I actually think this is a perfect illustration. Because is my heart absolutely in the right place when I'm trying to do this? Yeah, it totally is. Am I trying to do the right thing? Trying to do good research? Yeah, I am. And I mess up. Obviously mess up. So if I ever came to you, if I went, hey, Cine-Files, I am absolutely certain that Shannon McClung is about to commit a crime, I'm going to take him out. Should you guys trust my research?
No.
Particularly about Shannon. Nobody thinks
What crime did I commit, Steve?
Just being too damn handsome.
Bang.
So now I've already forgotten the name of that actor, John. Who is it that takes everyone out?
Jenny Agutter.
Jenny Agutter.
Yeah.
Well, it's also we have established I don't remember names. I only know names if I have them written down in front of me. Okay, so Jenny Agutter takes all these people out, and I think it's within, I don't know, 2 seconds that you go, that's Natasha. You know?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Which is great. No, I think that's great because the fighting style, they have established a fighting style, which is that's how she fights.
Yeah.
And she pushes a little button to make her cool mask disappear, and she says,
I'm sorry. Did I step on your moment?
and she is disabling all the protocols because she is going to dump all the information of Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. on the internet.
If you do this, none of your past is going to remain hidden. Are you sure you're ready for the world to see you as you really are?
And the camera pushes in on Natasha, which I think is it's a great, just plussing a scene by just a little bit. It's not something we're going to spend a lot of time on. It's just a little plus to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Cap gets his blade into the first helicarrier, says Alpha Lock. Falcon is still doing evasive maneuvers, and finally, one of the jets is firing on him, manages to blow a hole in the helicarrier, which allows him to get in. We get our second blade in. We have Bravo Lock. So we have one more to go.
Yep.
And now we have S.H.I.E.L.D. pilots scrambling to support Captain Rogers, and there's Bucky. And him just wrecking planes, throwing grenades, ripping apart jets, and jumping on his own jet and taking off. It's all... I think the Winter Soldier is a really scary villain.
Yeah, because it's the super soldier serum with the metal arm with no moral qualms about doing anything. The moment, just such a great, it's one of those action moments. I'm like, God, I wish I would have thought of something like that. When he gives that guy a kick to the chest so hard, it sends him into the air. Then he's sucked into the propeller from the Quinjet, taking that Quinjet out. That's just so that type of dynamic action, dynamic character-based action is so much fun to watch.
You know, and it also, I think the thing that you said about no conscience, it's why Bucky, when his memory comes back, is never as scary as he is as the Winter Soldier. He's never quite as cool, in my opinion, because it's that relentlessness of the character in this film that makes him so terrifying.
Disabling the encryption is an executive order. It takes 2 Alpha-level members.
Don't worry. Company's coming.
And, of course, that's when a helicopter lands. And we all know what's happening. There's Nick Fury. And when we go to do the retinal scanner, Pierce says,
You don't think we wiped your clearance from the system?
I know you erased my password. Probably deleted my retinal scan. But if you want to stay ahead of me, Mr. Secretary.
And Nick Fury lifts up that eye patch and says,
You need to keep both eyes open.
We see that messed up eye. And that is how he does the retinal scan.
Also, Redford has a great line here. That's just when he comes in. Did you get my flowers?
We're down to 6 minutes. And we have, this moment is repeated sort of twice in this film, which is we hear,
Hey, Sam, gonna need a ride. Roger, let me know when you're ready.
we land back on the helicarrier. There's the Winter Soldier who kicks Cap back off the helicarrier, and Sam goes to go after him, gets grabbed by the Winter Soldier, immediately loses a wing. He gets kicked off the carrier, manages to pop his chute just at the last minute in order to land safely. And then we're on this gangway, and we're behind Cap, and the camera moves around. We realize they're face to face. And this is where we knew the movie was getting to. Cap face to face with the Winter Soldier.
People are gonna die, Buck. I can't let that happen. Please don't make me do this.
And then we're into the fight. And again, it's another great fight. And we're intercutting. And one thing about the intercutting is, of course, in the script, there's intercutting because they were figuring out back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And basically, from what I heard, when they got into post, none of the intercutting that they had in the script worked. And this happens all the time, you know, and is that then they had to recut it in a different way that made it sort of fit together the right way. And that doesn't mean that they didn't write the intercutting beautifully in the script. It could have worked great in the script. And you read it, you're like, this is fantastic. And then just sometimes it's sound design or rhythmically or, you know, going from fast pace to slow pace and it's too jarring and you're not tracking exactly what's happening. Or you realize, oh, I have to check in on this story more often than I thought I did, or people are going to forget what's going on. Like all of those things you kind of discover as you're going through in post. And then, so we're back in the fight with Cap. It looks to me like Cap actually breaks Bucky's arm and then chokes him out.
Yeah.
Sam attacks Rumlow, gets knocked down, and then Rumlow makes this speech.
There are no prisoners with Hydra. Just order. And order only comes through pain. You ready for yours?
Shut the hell up.
And then, John, it's like, John, the Russo brothers planted things specifically for you.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of this fight, do you know what they planted specifically for you?
Tell me.
It is the Rocky 3 punch freeze frame.
Yeah.
That's how Brock and Sam go to punch each other, is both simultaneous Rocky 3 punch.
So good.
You know something that I love about that Rumlow moment and Sam's reaction? Earlier in the movie, when Steve asks Sam if he's happy, he's like, yeah, the amount of people giving me orders is down to about 0. The way that Brock talks to Sam, it's like an order.
Yeah.
It's like, are you ready for this? It's like, man, I'm done. I said goodbye to that life a long time ago. Now I get to tell you to shut the hell up. I think that was such a great moment.
Yep. Back in the council chamber, suddenly Pierce pushes a button and fries essentially one of those little ID things that the council members were wearing on their chest and turns to Natasha and says,
unless you want a 2-inch hole in your sternum, I put that gun down.
So now Pierce is back in charge. Cap is now climbing up to the platform to put that blade in. He gets shot in the leg because Bucky has come to, and then he's still going up. He gets shot in the shoulder, and then he gets shot in the back. Algorithm is getting ready to be deployed, and we're on like the bridge of the helicarrier, and we see people targeted all over the world.
Yeah.
And Cap manages to put that last chip in, and it all resets.
Charlie Lock.
Where are the targets?
And then Agent Hill says, okay, get out of there, because she's going to have the ships destroy each other.
Fire now.
But Steve...
Do it! Do it now!
And they open fire, and Cap stumbles. He looks down, and he sees that now Bucky is trapped under something.
You know, that was the time I would have taken a bullet for you.
You already did.
Oh, great line.
And then Natasha fires her own device, hurting herself to basically make her no longer be a hostage. And then Nick shoots Pierce through the glass. Goes over to Natasha.
No. Those really do sting.
My guess is she's wearing like armor or something underneath this, you know?
No, it's not that. It's those little discs that she used on the Winter Soldier. She has one in her hand, and that shoots
that's what
out
happens.
the little pendant.
I missed that. I didn't understand it. Brock is winning the fight, sadly, I think, with Sam. I think he's got the upper hand, except the helicarrier comes to the building and takes him out. Sam is running and calls on the radio.
Please tell me you got that chopper in the air!
Sam, where are you?
41st floor, northwest corner!
I didn't see where you are!
Not an option!
Which is basically exactly what happened with Cap a little while ago. And it's just ridiculous. He jumps out the window. Nick Fury manages to bank the chopper so that Sam can fly through the door, and Natasha catches him. We're really straining credulity, but it's done really, really well, I think.
Well, you earn this moment by delivering a great film, right? Exactly. You earn this because this is a ridiculous moment. that would never, ever actually be able to be pulled off.
I mean, the whole movie, the movie's filled with things like that, except this one is even more so.
Yeah, exactly.
And Natasha has managed to change in the 30 seconds since we last saw her. So Steve frees Bucky.
You know me. No, I don't! Bucky, you know me your whole life.
And he punches him again. And I just love that Steve is going to, I could do this all day. I mean, it's like a weird version of it, but it's like, I'm going to take whatever pounding I have to in order to make you understand who you are.
He's deprogramming him.
Yeah.
As best he knows how by using love. You know what I'm saying? And being there for him when he's lost, like Bucky offered to do with him when he was lost after the death of his mom. So it's not only the line that connects them, it's the time, it's the life situation that both of them are in.
Yeah.
That mirrors in reverse what they were in back in the 40s.
And Cap takes off his helmet, which, strangely enough, is what he did on another ship at the beginning of the movie in the middle of another fight.
Right.
Takes off his helmet, puts down his shield. But in this case, he says,
I'm not going to fight you. You're my friend.
And Bucky says,
you're my mission.
And what's so great, again, we know what's going to happen, really, deep down. There's an inevitability to this story. We know Cap is going to win. We know, I believe most people know, he's probably going to get Bucky to remember who he is.
Yeah.
But at the moment where he says, you're my mission, and Cap is really hurt, he's been shot multiple times, punched a bunch, and he's put down his shield, we're like, oh my God, this guy's going to kill Cap, you know?
Right.
Multiple punches, and he lifts his hand for that finishing blow.
Then finish it. Because I'm with you to the end of the line.
And there's a reaction, and that space creates just enough time for something to hit, and Steve falls out of the helicarrier. He hits the water. I think this is all perfectly filmed.
Yeah.
Because Steve is sinking and sinking. It's super desaturated. There are explosions and chaos above. Steve disappears down into the murk, and then just at the last second, we see that hand before going to black.
Yeah.
It's perfect. That is a perfect bit of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish we didn't have the scene on the shore where Bucky drags Steve to shore. Because I was good with the hand. You know what I mean? I already knew I didn't need to see more of Bucky at this moment for me.
Yeah. I hear your point. I liked it though, because it lets us know that Bucky's broken free from the programming, and now he's going to like figure out who he is and the way he looks, right, as he's walking off. But I mean, you could argue that you solve that case when we see him, as we're going to talk about in a couple of seconds, or a couple minutes, the post-credit scene where he's walking amongst the Smithsonian and sees his own story. You know,
I feel like you need the shot of him. You need the shot, because I feel like that scene with the post-credit sequence doesn't connect as clearly for some of the audience.
Yeah.
So you remember in part one, we were talking about, Shannon, you had mentioned that all of these Marvel movies have big reshoot budgets because they're always reshoots.
Mm-hmm.
This movie had almost no reshoots except for what's about to happen. All of this stuff post the big battle, I think almost all of it are reshoots. Which is interesting to me, because frequently what you need a reshoot for is you realize you didn't need a different way to connect this moment to that moment. Particularly like I've taken something out or I've rearranged something, and so now this moment no longer makes sense, and so I have to insert something in order to make it, to get me from here to there. My guess is that is the most common reason that you ever reshoot. This is all after everything. It's all, where did everybody end up that we decided we didn't get quite right. So we're in a hospital. We move past Sam, who's sitting up with Steve in bed. The music that is playing is Trouble Man.
Yep.
This was not in the original idea. They just knew there would be music playing, and they tried a bunch of other stuff until someone went, hey, why don't we try Trouble Man? We talked about it at the beginning of the movie, and of course it worked perfectly.
Well, there's an important thing for Trouble Man, right? Because for those of you who may not have seen it, the whole premise of the film is about this guy, Mr. T, who is a hard-edged private detective who tends to take justice into his own hands, but he is tricked into this situation here where he is told by these two guys here, Chalky and Pete, who are played by the great Paul Winfield, Star Trek connection there, and Ralph Waite. They've been ripped off several times by a group of robbers. So they hire Mr. T to go and find out who the robbers are, but they've actually set him up to take the fall for the robberies because they've been robbing from themselves in order to fatten their cash and fatten their accounts. So they hired Mr. T to make it look like they're investigating, but they end up trying to pin it all on Mr. T and double cross him. So there's a connection with what you see in the film, right? With the fact that Shield's been tricking. Oh, I'm sorry. Hydra's been tricking Shield the whole time, working behind the scenes to screw Shield over and have Shield take the blame for the fall, and then Hydra would take control of the entire thing. So I think that's the reason why they use Trouble Man. Other than it being a great song, obviously from Marvin Gaye, I just think there's a connection in the plot as well.
Nice, dude. I would never have. I've seen Trouble Man. I have no memory of it. I took a blaxploitation class in film school. And so I watched a whole bunch of these, but I don't remember Trouble Man very well. I never would have picked that up.
I think more people know it for the soundtrack than the film itself, but yeah, great point.
And Steve opens his eyes, looks over, sees Sam, and says,
"On your left."
It's a great moment.
Yeah.
And then we kind of see where everybody ends up. So we see that Sharon, who's shooting all bullseye in a shooting range, is in the CIA now. Maria Hill apparently is joining Stark Industries. Senator Shandling is arrested by the FBI. We see Rumlow, who is very wounded, being rolled into the hospital. We see kind of something going on with Nick Fury and passports. Natasha is having a hearing before like a Senate committee. And she says a bunch of stuff, none of which I think is actually terribly important.
Yeah, it's a weird scene. I don't know why they added that scene, because then she just walks out. You can't walk out in the middle of a sentence. I mean, you could, but I mean, it's kind of hammy. You know, I don't know why they included that. Maybe as a moment of defiance or whatever. But you know,
well, and particularly because the setup was. This is where they don't deliver on what has happened, because the setup was, are you really ready to let the world see you as you really are? Mm-hmm. And Natasha says yes, which means that she released information that included all of her dirty dealings.
Right.
And now she just walks out of this hearing. Like we don't, I think if you were going to deal with the repercussions, it should have been the repercussions of what the world now thinks of Black Widow, you know? But that's not, and I didn't feel like there was any information in this scene that was really necessary, you know? Mm-hmm. And then we're in a cemetery and Sam and Steve are there and Nick walks up and we look down at the gravestone, which says Nick Fury, the path of the righteous man, Ezekiel 25:17.
This moment in the theater at the ArcLight, the theater erupted. Yeah. I mean, this is such an enjoyable film. You're coming off such an incredible sequence, and to get the Pulp Fiction kind of reference right there at the end. I mean, the theater, that was the perfect capper to this movie.
That is a great Easter egg.
Yeah.
Because for people who didn't get it, it didn't matter.
Right.
It only took a second. And for people who do get it, it's fantastic. And we're kind of all going off on our missions, and Nick is going off to Europe, and Natasha goes,
"Be careful, Steve. You might not want to pull on that thread."
And we see an image of Bucky.
Yeah.
Because we know that's what Steve's got to go after.
Yeah. She hands him a file that she got from Kiev.
Yeah.
Kiev.
Which I think at the time we called it Kiev because we didn't have as much experience hearing about Kiev for very tragic reasons.
You're going after him.
You don't have to come with me.
I know. When do we start?
Which is great because it's like, because I won't. This is not a buddy movie. You know what I mean in the classic sense. But we definitely end up with some buddies at the end of it. You know.
Yeah. What's Cap's big issue the whole movie is
exactly
feeling like he has no one who has the same life experience as he does. Well, here by the end, even though he might have rediscovered and lost a friend again in Bucky, Sam is there, and Sam has just become, in essence, a member of the superhero fighting crew, and he has been in war and in the military. So now Cap has at least one tent pole in the ground that he can connect to, And of course, later on, it'll be Bucky again, with the Winter Soldier stuff.
And I think he now genuinely has a real friendship with Natasha that he didn't have before.
Yeah, good point.
I think that is that he does trust her now.
Yeah,
when he didn't before. I think this credit sequence is really cool looking.
It's my favorite one. Favorite end credit sequence of all the MCU movies, man. It's badass.
It's done by companies Swarovski, who worked with the Russos on Community, and it's also inspired by comic book artist David W. Mack. And then we have post credits, and this was a script that the Russo brothers never saw on sets that they never saw because they did not write this and they did not direct this. This is all written and directed by Joss Whedon.
Oh, interesting.
And I think it totally shows.
Yeah, agreed.
I think this looks like cheesy comic book stuff in a way that Captain America the Winter Soldier never did.
Okay.
That's my feeling. And we're in some sort of a high, and I also think the scene goes really long for me.
Oh yeah.
We're in like this Hydra lab and we're talking about Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. and what's going to happen. And then we see that they have Loki's scepter, which is a great callback and obviously is setting up things in the future.
What about the volunteers?
The dead will be buried so deep their own ghosts won't be able to find them.
And the survivors?
And there we see Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in two like glass cells. And she's doing magical things and floating, and he's moving super fast and, around in this little tiny cage.
It's not a world of spies anymore, not even a world of heroes. This is the age of miracles, Doctor. There's nothing more horrifying than a miracle.
We have this last moment looking at the two of them. And then we have our second post-credit scene, which is what you brought up before, John, of we're at the Smithsonian. We see this man in a dark jacket moving through, and he looks at the Bucky exhibit. The camera pans around in a big circle, and we see there is Bucky. And the music, I think, builds up almost to a scream at this moment as we go to black. And that is the end of Captain America the Winter Soldier.
Woo! Woo!
I have very little about post, but I do have a marketing question, which is, gentlemen, were you at Comic-Con when this was premiered in 2013?
We were, because the panel was that. I think this was the panel that Tom Hiddleston came out dressed as Loki.
Yeah.
And they introduced footage from Thor: The Dark World. They showed footage from Winter Soldier. They showed the first bit of footage from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh yeah.
And that is where I think that's where we found out the title of the next Avengers film, Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
That was a big Hall H presentation.
Yeah, it was.
How excited were you guys back at that era to be in Hall H for that stuff? Bro.
This is when John and I would wait in line for hours to see the first panel of the day, which would typically be Warner Brothers, not necessarily just DC, but Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
I can't remember if this was the year that Eddie Redmayne was there for Fantastic Beasts. It may not have been.
Oh, wow.
But we saw the Warner Brothers panel. In the middle of the day was the Fox panel, and they brought out the entire cast for X-Men Days of Future Past, which was a great, great panel because it was the old cast of the X-Men and the new cast of the X-Men. And to close with this, I mean, the electricity in Hall H, it was just crackling. And having Tom Hiddleston come out in that outfit, addressing the audience as Loki, it was just so much fun. These are the days when John and I used to drag each other to the finish line of Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know if we could do it again, to be honest. It's a bit more, but yeah, I mean, that was a perfect sweet spot, and by the end, we're like monkeys in a zoo, we're just screaming crazy, throwing shit at a wall and, going nuts, yelling because they did such a great job in their prime. Marvel did such a great job with those panels. They built correctly. They knew exactly how to schedule what they were revealing in those panels and build to the big moment and hit that moment, all cylinders firing at once and getting the optimal reaction that you want. And I just remember that being something that was just incredible to witness. And that's when I first started to glimpse that the Marvel universe could be more. The MCU could be more, was the Winter Soldier stuff. That's when I was like, okay, anything's possible here, man. And this is so great. But yeah. Yeah. And that it came to fruition was even better, you know.
Exactly. Well, it's so crazy thinking about the difference between then and 10 years later, when things are shaky and those panels are met with distrust, you know, and there's been so many missteps. But this was not a misstep. It made $714 million in the box office on a budget of $177 million. It surprised me, the only nomination it received was for Best Visual Effects, which it lost to Interstellar, which seems totally reasonable to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I love this movie. And so I looked at these are what the best pictures were, nominations were that year, which is an interesting list. It's American Sniper, Boyhood, Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, Selma, The Theory of Everything, Whiplash, and Birdman, which won. I still would put Captain America in that list. I wish it had been nominated.
I would put it over 4 of those.
Yeah.
At least.
Imitation Game,
yes.
Theory of Everything.
Yes.
I don't love the Grand Budapest Hotel. I know everybody else does.
Oh, I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Take
that I think that's my favorite Wes Anderson film. But
I think
Birdman,
Boyhood is a fascinating experiment.
It's an exhausting film.
But I don't like the movie.
Yeah, I don't like the movie. I would move Boyhood.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think Captain America Winter Soldier is great, I will just jump into my final thoughts.
Okay.
This is just a fun ride beginning to end. And it's like if I just I talked about when I was a lad and I just sought out great fight scenes. I just wanted to see great fight scenes. And I would watch the most terrible movie in the world if there was a great fight scene. Right. I would totally have watched this movie just for the action sequences because they're fantastic. But what makes this movie a great movie to me is 2 things. The first is just the reference to 70s espionage thrillers, particularly 3 Days of the Condor and those kinds of films. Like the film geek in me just love that and having Robert Redford in it. But the biggest thing is taking this character who is as perfect a person as you can imagine and making them completely unmoored and dealing with their loneliness and their lack of relationships. And because it's things like the incredible Peggy scene, the relationship with Sam, watching, the not being able to trust Natasha and looking at putting this guy in this world where he doesn't fit in. And I was thinking about it just briefly. I was like, when Cap was first defrosted in the comic books, it was 1963, which means it was 18 years later. So all the people he knew, they were in their 40s, and that world isn't that different. Cap being thawed in the 2000s, he's completely alone. And I think it's that loneliness of this great person and who's not used to sharing vulnerability, having to be vulnerable. That's what makes this movie a great film to me. And I truly, truly think of this as a great film. Shannon, what are your final thoughts?
In terms of solo character adventures in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is number 1 for me. It's always tough when you're doing your silly, unnecessary personal lists of your Marvel films. That it's like Endgame and Infinity War. Man, that was a high point that as comic fans we never thought we were going to see on a screen. So those movies get a lot of credit for that. But in terms of just one character's adventure while having an entire supporting cast with satisfying and entertaining arcs, this one is the tops. I mean, this is probably the one that I go back and watch the most, even though I hadn't seen it in a minute. So getting to rewatch it, I actually watched it twice for this. Captain America, the Winter Soldier is for me at least at this point, is always going to be top 5 in my personal MCU rankings. And again, like the connective tissue between this and Age of Ultron is a little wonky. But where this movie ends, again, as a viewer, is just so incredibly satisfying. And in my opinion, not an inauthentic moment with any of the performances.
It's been so great to revisit this film. And as you said, Steve, just a couple of minutes ago, reminding us back when Shannon and I were in Hall H for Marvel, like it's good to remember how great Marvel was and can still be. And it's great to remember why they were so great, why people fell in love with them. And this movie, to me, as a cinephile first and foremost, is my number 1 MCU film because I think it is the most similar to the closest we'll come to a film so far that we've come to a film that is in the realm of a film you should watch on TCM, or in the realm of a film that should be appreciated as a classic film, because its guts, its bones are these 70s spy thrillers. That's what its bones are. And it works on that level. Feige was so smart to keep it grounded. And it's not only the espionage and the spy and all of that. It's what you just pointed out, Steve. It is also a personal story about a man with this incredible power and this immense power who feels so alone and feels lost and has nobody to connect with. And it's saying how important that is. Our connection to people is an important thing. It's how you believe in people. It's how you believe in the human spirit. And the more cynical point of view is the Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. We must lead by fear. We must let fear lead us to create a thing where we can monitor everybody, or we create a system in place so that we can influence all these elections, influence and overturn power in countries so that we stay the dominant power. So it is all of that, whereas Steve leans from a different place. And I think the film does an excellent job of exploring those points of views and those life philosophies and how, and clearly chooses a side by the end. And it's important that it chooses a side because that's the hope that superheroes bring. And sometimes that's the hope that these espionage thrillers bring by the end, when the person escapes, when the person does end up turning the bad guy in or bad people in and they get exposed, you know? And so it's important to have that in our world. And I thought the Russo brothers did an excellent job directing this one. As you said, the score is incredible as well. And it did a great job of deepening Natasha's character, introducing Sam, showing us more of Nick Fury and have us start to question Nick Fury a little bit, which carries over into multiple movies and delivers some incredible action sequences along with some really poignant commentary about our world, both as a global situation and our usage of intelligence, and also as human beings and the need to connect and care for one another, because in the end, if we lead by fear, it will only lead to bad things happening to us. So yeah, it's a film that should definitely be considered for the National Library of Congress as one of the greatest films ever made.
Can't say anything better than that. So that's what we think of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Of course, we love your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for The Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on Twitter, The Cine-Files Podcast on Instagram. Subscribe to the show if you haven't already in all the usual places. And I mean in all the usual places. So you should subscribe in Apple Podcasts and in Spotify and on Google Play and through Audible, and go to the YouTube page and subscribe there, particularly on the YouTube page, because you get to see our beautiful faces once a month when we do our live shows, which is a lot of fun. You can also support the show on patreon.com/The Cine-Files, where you can get ad-free versions of the show. You can see our upcoming schedule. You can listen to watch-alongs. You can listen to our Cine-Files shorts, and you can even join our Cine-Files advisory board, which helps guide the Cine-Files into the future. And another way to support the show is if you're an Apple Podcast person, you can just subscribe right there, and that will give you ad-free versions of the show as well as our Cine-Files shorts. We don't have all of our episodes up there yet. I think we have just over 100. And so we're slowly but surely loading up all of our episodes up on Apple Podcasts, and that's just a $4.99 a month subscription. So check that out, and you can buy or stream Captain America: The Winter Soldier, along with every other movie we've ever reviewed, on our website, cinephiles.net. And if you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would people reach you?
Always at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcasts, if you want to listen, The Geek Buddies, which I co-host with the great Shannon McClung, who was our guest today, and The Hot Mic, which I do with Jeff Snyder, that's out there for you all to subscribe to separately.
And speaking of the great Shannon McClung, how would people find you on the web?
On Twitter, you can follow me at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. And yes, you can see me twice a week with Mr. Rocha on the Geek Buddies. We're currently reviewing X-Men 97 week to week, and we have our regular show. And thank you all so much for bringing me back for this. I can't wait for 2026 when we talk about Captain America: Civil War.
You will absolutely be there. Thank you so much, Shannon. It was great having you in this conversation. And I think that is it for this week. We will see you next time with another great film right here on The Cine-Files.